Chapter 314. 3-Star Flowing Fire. The Long Clan's Secret Art. Legend has it that the Long Clan's ancestors created the 3-Star Flowing Fire Talisman Array on the basis of the ordinary Flowing Fire technique. Its power is extremely strong, and this is the first time I've seen the 3-Star Flowing Fire Talisman Array. Legend has it that above the 3-Star Flowing Fire, there is still the 6-Star Flowing Fire and the 9-Star Flowing Fire. Now that we've seen the 3-Star Flowing Fire already have such enormous power, I really don't know how strong the 6-Star Flowing Fire and the even higher 9-Star Flowing Fire would be. Long Xiao is facing Su Xing. In terms of attributes, there is already some restraint. Now that she has inscribed the 3-Star Flowing Fire Talisman Array, Su Xing's 10,000 Swords technique practically melted away in an instant. I really don't know how Su Xing will deal with Long Xiao's attacks after this. Looking at the 3 enormous black fireballs in the air above the stage, the spectators were all shocked. In the Foundation Establishment realm, only a Talisman Array Master could create such a huge momentum. Compared to the spectators' shock, Su Xing's performance was much calmer. Seeing that the 10,000 Swords technique was broken by Long Xiao's 3-Star Flowing Fire, a golden talisman appeared in front of him. A sharp aura was emitted from this talisman, as if it had the power to split open the heavens and split the earth. Sharp metal, Su Xing angrily shouted. Holding the sharp metal sword in his hand, he suddenly rushed forward, unexpectedly ignoring the 3 enormous black fireballs and brazenly attacking Long Xiao. When those 3 black fireballs fell from the sky, falling in front of Su Xing raised the sharp golden sword in his hand. Stabbing out, the sword chi weaved unhindered, unexpectedly directly piercing through the fireballs, splitting them in 2. Su Xing consecutively attacked 3 times, and the 3-Star Flowing Fire was defeated. Seeing this scene, countless spectators stared with wide eyes, sucking in a breath of cold air. No one would have thought that in a situation where his attributes were restrained, Su Xing could unexpectedly still explode with such powerful strength, unexpectedly directly defeating the 3-Star Flowing Fire. And those with good eyesight actually clearly knew that Su Xing's sudden explosion was closely related to the talisman in front of him. We underestimated Su Xing too much. In a situation where he has the Sword Intent talisman, Su Xing can completely ignore attribute restraint and explode with an extremely powerful battle strength. This time, Long Xiao is in danger. I also did not expect that the Su Xing who normally did not reveal himself would have already comprehended the Sword Intent rune, grasping the all-conquering sharp metal sword intent. Long Xiao's black flame is known to burn everything, and Su Xing's sword's sharp metal sword intent nevertheless is unstoppable. We have already seen the result of the collision between the two. The sharp metal sword intent completely triumphed over the 3-Star Flowing Fire. After the audience heard the commentator's explanation, they realized that the rune in front of Su Xing was actually a Sword Intent rune. Originally, Long Xiao thought that the 3-Star Flowing Fire Talisman Array she inscribed was enough to defeat Su Xing. However, the appearance of the Sword Intent Talisman script nevertheless made Long Xiao's entire plan be disrupted. Whoosh! Su Xing's figure appeared in front of Long Xiao like a demon. His wrist shook, and the sharp metal sword slashed towards Long Xiao. The sword tip had yet to approach Long Xiao, but the sword intent made Long Xiao feel a burst of fear and trepidation. At the crucial moment, Long Xiao's figure suddenly disappeared from where she was. The next moment, her figure persisted in a remnant flame not too far away. After pulling apart the distance between her and Su Xing by a shifting form shadow, Long Xiao did not hesitate at all, immediately beginning to inscribe the talisman array again. And at this time, Su Xing actually threw the sharp metal sword in his hand, thrusting it towards Long Xiao like lightning. Imperial Sword Technique, Sharp Metal. The sharp metal sword, under the control of Su Xing's thoughts, cut open the sky, appearing in front of Long Xiao with an unstoppable posture, completely not giving Long Xiao the chance to inscribe the talisman array. seeing that the sharp metal sword was about to stab Long Xiao. In front of Long Xiao, an incomparably strange, pitch-black lotus-shaped flame appeared, unexpectedly blocking the all-conquering sharp metal sword. Divine flame descends, Black Lotus. Long Xiao angrily shouted, and the Black Lotus in front of her suddenly enlarged, transforming into a lotus platform. Bearing Long Xiao, it emitted an astonishingly hot aura, as if it could burn the heavens and boil the seas, turning everything into ashes. And the sharp metal sword at this time was suppressed under the lotus platform. No matter how Su Xing manipulated it, it was unable to move. Oh my god. Originally, I thought that in this competition, seeing the sharp metal sword intent was already a very rare thing. I did not expect that I would unexpectedly be able to see the Long clan's secret divine flame technique. Divine flame descends. You must know, this is a secret technique that is comparable to the Qin clan's extreme wind technique. Extreme wind technique. Although the divine flame descends is powerful, the sharp metal sword intent cannot be underestimated. At this time, although the lotus platform is suppressing the sharp metal sword intent, it is only suppressing and nothing more. To want to defeat the sharp metal sword intent is actually somewhat difficult. Now, it will depend on whether Long Xiao or Su Xing can persevere for a bit longer. Below the stage, Qin Chuan looked at the dignified Long Xiao sitting upright on the lotus platform. He pursed his lips and said, Long Xiao is in a bit of trouble. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi frowned and said, This Su Xing's sharp metal sword intent is too powerful. It is very difficult for Long Xiao to wear down this sword intent. This suppression is only temporary. Wait until Su Xing accumulates enough power. Then he can overturn this lotus platform. At this time, Chen Changxing's face was full of worry. Who could have thought that the opponent Long Xiao encountered would unexpectedly be so abnormal? Unexpectedly, at Foundation Establishment late stage, he already comprehended the sword intent runes that the majority of Golden Core stage sword cultivators could comprehend. With the support of the keen metal sword intent, Su Xing's attack power would become unprecedentedly terrifying. Long Xiao absolutely could not make the slightest mistake. In case she was struck by the keen metal sword intent, she would undoubtedly lose. Compared to the Black Moon Combat Academy's worry and nervousness, the Divine Sword Academy's group was much more relaxed. Of course, they knew that Long Xiao's attribute would restrain Su Xing, but to Su Xing, who had comprehended the sharp metal sword intent, that sort of restraint was nothing. At this time, Su Xing still had not released his complete form. If Su Xing went all out, then Long Xiao would have already been defeated. After Long Xiao loses, the Black Moon Combat Academy will most likely let Lu Zi go on stage. At that time, Su Xing can completely use his full strength to defeat Lu Zi. The remaining Qin Chuan and Baiyu could be left to me. We will take care of them. Although Su Xing had not yet won, Su Miaoer had already determined that Su Xing would win. She did not feel that Long Xiao had the ability to turn defeat into victory. Just as everyone was discussing the situation on the stage, a new unforeseen event occurred on the stage. They saw the Long Xiao sitting upright on the lotus platform suddenly fly up. The lotus platform she sat on actually scattered in all directions, becoming 10 petals that enveloped the sharp metal sword. Divine flame descends. Incinerate. Long Xiao's move was actually to use the black flame to melt the sharp metal sword. Chapter 315. After perceiving Long Xiao's intentions, Su Xing's complexion could not help but slightly change. He shouted, Imperial sword art, broken cliff. At this time, under the Black Lotus's burning, although the sharp gold sword could still support itself, the sword's body had already become scalding hot. The intent Su Xing attached to the sharp gold sword became somewhat fuzzy. Even though Su Xing already used all of his strength to control the sharp gold sword to attack the lotus platform, wanting to break free, it was nevertheless already somewhat too late. At this time, People with discerning eyes could see that Su Xing was already in an absolutely disadvantaged position under Long Zhao's powerful counterattack. As long as the sharp gold sword received heavy damage, Su Xing's abilities would be equivalent to being reduced by more than half. At that time, he would be at Long Zhao's mercy. Just when everyone thought Long Zhao was about to melt the sharp gold sword and defeat Su Xing, that lotus platform nevertheless suddenly shook, as if it had received some extremely fierce attack. The next moment, it unexpectedly collapsed, and the complexion of the Long Zhao sitting upright on the lotus platform immediately paled. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The lotus platform collapsed, and the completely red sharp gold sword fell to the ground. It let out a sizzling sound and emitted a white mist. It seemed as if it was already not far from being scrapped. And the Su Xing, who was connected with the sharp gold sword at this time, saw the miserable state of the sharp gold sword. Unexpectedly, his complexion also paled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing the two people, Long Zhao and Su Xing, vomiting blood one after another on the stage, the spectators were all stupefied. Who could have thought that the situation would suddenly undergo such a drastic change? Long Zhao and Su Xing, the two people, seemed to have unexpectedly brought about a result where both sides suffered. Seeing this scene on the platform, the experienced and knowledgeable commentator sighed and said, "The lotus platform collapsed, not because of the sharp gold sword's counterattack, but because Long Zhao was unable to completely control the lotus platform. She was only barely using the lotus platform's power to refine the sharp gold sword. The result was that she suffered a backlash from the lotus platform, falling short of success. Yes, if it was not because Long Zhao's control of the lotus platform had a problem, perhaps this battle would have been Long Zhao's victory. It's a pity that the current situation is actually a lose-lose situation. Regardless of whether it is Long Zhao or Su Xing, they already do not have a strength to continue fighting." After hearing the commentator's explanation, the audience finally recovered from their shock. Who would have thought that the reason the lotus platform collapsed was because Long Zhao's strength wasn't enough to fully control the lotus platform, and he had suffered a backlash from the lotus platform? It could be said that Su Xing was extremely lucky. If it was not for the lotus platform's backlash, the result of his many years of painstakingly refining the sharp metal sword would have been completely lost. Although he had suffered heavy injuries at this time, fortunately, it was not considered too bad. So long as he carefully nursed it for a period of time, there would be no problem. In this battle, Long Zhao and Su Xing simultaneously lost their battle strength. The result of this confrontation is judged to be a draw. Hearing the referee's words, the audience couldn't help but sigh. In this year's 6 Great Academies ranking competition, there were too many draws. A draw is already the best result. Qin Chuan looked at Long Zhao, who was slowly climbing up from the arena, with a complicated expression. He said helplessly, "She is too stubborn and unwilling to admit defeat." Originally, when Su Xing used his trump card, the sharp metal sword intent, Long Zhao already had no chance of victory. Who would have thought that Long Zhao would risk a heavy injury to use a move that she still couldn't completely control, forcefully fighting Su Xing until both sides suffered? Long Zhao has spent too much energy on the path of talisman arrays. The divine flame technique is all-encompassing, complex, and profound. For Long Zhao to completely master both of them is really too difficult. For her to be able to reach this step is truly not easy. Qin Changxing could understand Long Zhao very well. He also cultivated the Black Sky sect's secret technique, Mysterious Heaven Chant, but he only used it as a cultivation method to cultivate. Some of the talisman arrays and secret techniques that came with it, he only dabbled in them and didn't delve too deeply into them. On the contrary, he used all of his energy to study the path of talisman arrays. Although the number of talisman arrays he knew could not be considered many, his study was thorough enough. Using them was easy and handy, and he could display power that far surpassed the talisman arrays themselves. On the other hand, Long Xiao not only had to spend a lot of energy to study the path of talisman arrays, she also had to spend a lot of energy to study the secret techniques of the divine flame technique. However, a person's energy was limited. The consequence of Long Xiao doing this was that no matter if it was talisman arrays or the divine flame technique, she had reached the pinnacle of what she could do. Although she was very strong, she was only very strong. She wasn't like Su Xing, who was strong to the extreme in a certain aspect. In the end, it was still Long Xiao who was too greedy. Looking at Long Xiao, who slowly walked back, Qin Xuan and the others tactfully didn't step forward to support her. They just smiled and said to Long Xiao, "Thank you for your hard work." Hearing this, Long Xiao raised her head to look at Qin Xuan and said, "Qin Haoshuan cultivated the extreme wind technique and used it to perfection, but I couldn't completely master the divine flame technique. I'm not as good as him, am I right?" Hearing Long Xiao's words, Qin Xuan couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. In terms of family background, Long Xiao was not worse than Qin Haoshuan. In some aspects, she was even better than Qin Haoshuan. In terms of talent, Qin Haoshuan was the Qilin of the Qin clan, a genius rarely seen in 1,000 years. And in terms of cultivation techniques, the extreme wind technique and the divine flame technique were both top-notch cultivation techniques. The difficulty should be about the same. However, Qin Haoshuan could perfectly master the secret technique of the extreme wind technique, and Long Xiao could only barely master the secret technique of the divine flame technique. In comparison, Long Xiao was naturally better than Qin Haoshuan. However, things couldn't be looked at like this. After all, Long Xiao knew a lot of powerful talisman arrays, but Qin Haoshuan knew nothing about talisman arrays. Actually, you should give up some things. Qin Xuan seriously pondered for a moment. In the end, he still decided to give Long Xiao some advice. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Ask yourself honestly, do I think the most suitable thing for you is the divine flame technique or the talisman array? Sometimes, learning to give up is not necessarily a bad thing. Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Long Xiao couldn't help but sink into contemplation. Seeing Long Xiao lowering her head and seriously pondering, everyone didn't disturb her. Instead, they began to discuss in low voices who would be the next to fight. Baiyu go. Qin Xuan glanced at Lu Zi and said, "If Baiyu loses, let me go." Lu Zi was stunned for a moment. She asked, "Why don't you let me go? Everyone has their own specialization. You are good at illusory arrays. Facing the sword cultivators of the God Sword Academy who are good at attacking, you will be restrained too much. There is no meaning in letting you go." Qin Xuan said to Lu Zi very seriously, "You also know that no matter who you meet, you will be completely restrained. There is almost no chance of victory. Illusory array masters were good at sneak attacks and waiting for prey. It was very difficult to do anything in the open arena. Rather than letting Lu Zi go on stage and get injured again, Qin Xuan would rather let Lu Zi cheer for them from below the stage." Chapter 316. Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Lu Zi originally wanted to fight, but when the words reached her mouth, she did not say them, because she knew that what Qin Xuan said was correct. Her insistence on fighting would not bring any benefits to the Black Moon Combat Academy. It was meaningless. For the first time in her life, Lu Zi felt that she was so useless as an illusion array master. "Don't be discouraged." Qin Xuan reached out and gently patted Lu Zi's shoulder. Then, he said to the silent Baiyu standing to the side, "Don't push yourself too hard. Remember what I said to you before. Do your best, don't push yourself." Baiyu understood Qin Xuan's meaning. She glanced at Qin Xuan and then gently nodded, saying, "I know." On the other side, the Divine Sword Academy saw Su Xing hugging the sharp metal sword as he walked down the stage. Their expressions were somewhat unsightly, not because Su Xing did not win, but because the sharp metal sword was almost destroyed. As far as a sword cultivator was concerned, nothing was more important than the sword in their hands. The sharp metal sword had already accompanied Su Xing for more than 10 years. It was already one of the most important companions in Su Xing's life. Now that it was almost destroyed, They could naturally empathize with Su Xing's sorrow. Su Xing, wait until after the competition is over. I will apply for a sword testing stone for you. Su Kuang looked at the already severely damaged sharp metal sword in Su Xing's bosom and could only comfort Su Xing like this. The sword testing stone was a magic weapon that the Divine Sword Villa used to sharpen sword intent. It was not easily bestowed. This time, for the sake of the Divine Sword Academy's honor, for the sake of the Divine Sword Villa's prestige, Su Xing used all of his strength, causing the sharp metal sword to be heavily damaged. With Su Kuang's position in the Divine Sword Villa, to ask for a sword testing stone for Su Xing was not a difficult matter. Hearing Su Kuang's words, Su Xing's originally gloomy complexion became slightly better. If he could have a sword testing stone, the sharp metal sword could recover earlier and would not have too much of an impact on his future cultivation. As far as he was concerned, this was absolutely good news. After pacifying Su Xing, Su Kuang turned her gaze to Su Shurjiu, saying, "Now that we have one defeat and one draw, the rest is up to you. According to my estimations, the other party will probably send out that illusion array master Lu Zi. I can definitely defeat her. If it was someone else, perhaps Su Jiu wouldn't be so confident." However, facing Lu Zi, he was 100% sure that he could win. Just as Su 19 was about to say something, the crowd suddenly noticed some movement from the Black Moon Combat Academy. Baiyu slowly walked towards the stage. Su Shurjiu's expression couldn't help but change slightly when he saw Baiyu walk towards the arena. He didn't have the confidence to win against the mysterious and strange Baiyu. "It's actually her." Su Miao looked at Baiyu with subtle eyes and said to Su Kuang, "Baiyu is very strong and mysterious. No one knows what she is good at. Su Jiu may not win against her. Why don't you let me do it? Let 19 go." Su Kuang said indifferently. Even if he can't win, he can at least test Baiyu's strength. The Black Moon Combat Academy is the first to send out someone. This time it's Baiyu, that extremely mysterious girl. Since the start of the tournament, Baiyu has only taken action once. That time, she used a strange method to instantly kill her opponent. Even now, we still have very little understanding of her. It can even be said that we know nothing about her. I hope that in the following matches, the Godsword Academy will be able to force out some details about Baiyu and let us see just how strong this mysterious girl is. At this time, the audience was also curiously sizing up Baiyu. Baiyu looked sweet and cute. She should have had the image of a very gentle girl, but because her personality was too cold, it made her look a little arrogant and aloof. She was also a little cute. The Godsword Academy has also sent out their representative, 17 Swords Su 19. It's said that Su 19 is called 17 Swords because no one has ever been able to withstand more than 17 swords from him. Moreover, if he does, then Su 19 will definitely lose. It has to be said that he's a very special contestant. I'm looking forward to the clash between Su 19 and Baiyu. Let's see if Baiyu can withstand 17 swords from Su 19. When Su 19 walked onto the stage, the referee announced the start of the match. The 6 Great Academies ranking tournament, the official stage of the semifinals. The Godsword Academy against the Black Moon Combat Academy. Su 19 against Baiyu. The match begins now. The moment the referee's whistle sounded, Su 19 quickly rushed towards Baiyu. However, the strange thing was that he didn't draw his sword. Facing the charging Su 19, Baiyu was expressionless. She stretched out a white, almost transparent palm and waved it at Su 19. Su 19, who had been moving forward at high speed, suddenly staggered and almost fell to the ground. At this time, Baiyu's figure strangely appeared in front of Su 19. She raised her hand and punched out, directly hitting Su 19's face. Bang! Accompanied by a slightly dull sound, Su 19 felt a lump in his throat. His vision blurred, and his mind became a little dizzy. The next moment, he fell on the arena with a plop and fainted. Seeing that Su 19 had fainted, Baiyu slowly turned her gaze towards the referee, who was still standing on the stage. She signaled for the referee to check on Su 19's condition before announcing the result of the match. The audience looked at the situation on the stage and were stunned. The commentator also felt that his brain wasn't working properly. Who could tell me what just happened? Why did Su-19 suddenly lose his footing and almost fall? Baiyu actually insta-killed her opponent again. The mysterious girl is indeed worthy of being called mysterious. Before the match started, I knew that Su-19 would lose, but I didn't think that he would lose so easily. Compared to before, Baiyu only used one more punch. Su-19, who was known to be undefeatable within 17 swords, was insta-killed in one move. He didn't even draw his sword. Below the stage, the people from the God Sword Academy were silent. They looked strangely at Baiyu, who was standing on the stage. No one knew how to describe the shock that Baiyu brought to them. As Su-19's friends, they knew him very well. Even if Su Kuang went all out, Su-19 could last at least 17 moves before being defeated. However, Baiyu insta-killed Su-19 in one move. Didn't this mean that even if Su Kuang met Baiyu, he might also be insta-killed? This person is dangerous. Su Miao looked deeply at Baiyu. I'll go next. Chapter 317. In the eyes of the audience, Baiyu is extremely mysterious. When they watched other people's matches, whether it was Qin Haoshuan or Qin Chuan, they could at least see some of the rules. However, Baiyu is really unfathomable. So far, no one knew how she defeated her opponents. Even those who were defeated by Baiyu couldn't say anything about it. It could be said that it was quite strange. Baiyu is really unfathomable. I'm especially curious about her achievements in the field of glyphs. Everyone knew that the Black Moon Combat Academy had always been famous for its talisman arrays. If one wanted to enter the Black Moon Combat Academy, the first prerequisite was to become a talisman array master. In other words, Baiyu is definitely a talisman array master. However, no one knew how strong she was in terms of talisman arrays. If Baiyu also has extremely deep attainments in the Tao of Talismans, then her strength is a bit too terrifying. Baiyu hadn't even shown her full strength yet, but she was already able to kill opponents 2 levels above her. If Baiyu exploded with her full strength, then wouldn't she be invincible? The audience was also very curious about Baiyu's true strength. Now, the God Sword Academy still had Su Miao, and Su Kuang. Su Miao, didn't dare to say, but everyone felt that Su Kuang could definitely force Baiyu to use her full strength. After all, Su Kuang was the Little Sword Fairy, ranked 2nd on the Star Dragon list. The God Sword Academy has sent someone to fight. It's the Lover Sword, Su Miao. As expected, before Su Kuang enters the stage, they should send someone to test Baiyu. As far as I know, Su Miao is good at using dual swords. She's good at both offense and defense, and has endless variations. She once fought 3 opponents at the same level without being at a disadvantage. Maybe she can force Baiyu to use her full strength. Even if she can't, she can at least force out a part of it. That's right. Although Su Miao is low-key, her strength can't be underestimated. Maybe Baiyu's strength isn't as strong as we think, but she's mysterious. All right, the match is about to start. Let's look forward to the exciting battle between Baiyu and Su Miao. On the stage, Su Miao slowly walked in front of Baiyu. She looked at Baiyu with a serious expression and said, "You're strong and mysterious." Facing Su Miao, Baiyu was still expressionless. She didn't seem to have any desire to speak. She looked at Su Miao, calmly, quietly waiting for the match to begin. Su Miao, wasn't surprised by Baiyu's reaction. She had investigated Baiyu before and knew that Baiyu was an iceberg who liked to communicate with people. Therefore, she didn't expect Baiyu to respond to her. She just wanted to tell Baiyu what she wanted to say. If it's possible, I hope that you can show me some of your true abilities. Of course, the premise is that I have the qualifications to force you to use your true abilities. Su Miao took a deep look at Baiyu and slowly put her hands on the Lover's Sword at her waist, ready to attack. 6 Great Academies Ranking Tournament, the official stage of the semifinals. Divine Sword Academy versus Black Moon Combat Academy. Su Miao versus Baiyu. Let the competition begin. Do-do-do. When the whistle sounded, Su Miao didn't immediately attack Baiyu. She was always on guard against Bayu's strange and mysterious methods to instantly kill her. She carefully observed everything around her. Seeing that Su Miao did not move, Bayu took the initiative to charge at Su Miao. Seeing that Bayu was in front of her, Su Miao subconsciously wanted to pull out the lover's sword at her waist to deal with it. But at this moment, she suddenly felt that her hands were not listening to her. Noticing this, Su Miao's expression changed slightly. She immediately made the decision to dodge. However, the moment she took a step to the left, she felt that her legs were extremely stiff, as if they were filled with concrete. This is Su Miao's pupils suddenly shrank. Bang! Bayu's fist easily hit Su Miao, knocking her to the ground. Seeing that Su Miao was knocked down by Bayu like Su Shurjiu without any ability to fight back, the audience couldn't help but exclaim. Who would have thought that even the lover's sword, Su Miao, wouldn't be able to escape this move? Bayu's instant kill method is really too inconceivable. I really don't understand how she did it. The commentator really didn't understand. It seemed that no matter who faced Bayu, it would be difficult to escape the fate of being instantly killed. What I'm more curious about now is whether Bayu's mysterious instant kill ability can only be used against Foundation establishment opponents, or can it ignore the difference in realms? When another commentator spoke, the audience couldn't help but fall into deep thought. If Bayu's ability was only used against Foundation establishment opponents, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if it could be used across realms, even if it could only instantly kill an early Golden Core stage opponent, it would still be shocking enough. Just when everyone thought that Su Miao was bound to lose, Su Miao was suddenly turned over and dodged Bayu's attack. It took the opportunity to widen the distance between her and Bayu. Su Miao looked at Bayu with an extremely shocked gaze and said in an incredulous tone, "I found out the reason why you can instantly kill your opponent, but this is really shocking." Hearing Su Miao's words, the audience and the commentator couldn't help but pricked up their ears curiously. Su Miao actually found out the secret of Bayu's instant kill ability. What was this secret? Blood. Su Miao took a deep breath and said in an extremely firm tone, "You control our blood to achieve the purpose of our actions, and then kill us instantly." When she couldn't draw her sword just now, Su Miao didn't immediately notice the change in the blood in her body. When she wanted to dodge sideways, there were obvious signs of blood coagulation on her legs. Su Miao realized that the reason why she couldn't control her hands to draw her sword was that the blood in her hands was controlled and controlled her actions. Although the two signs of blood coagulation happened very quickly, Su Miao was sure that Bayu must have the ability to control blood. This was simply a devil's ability. When Su Miao's voice fell, there was an uproar in the audience. They had heard of many strange abilities, but this was the first time they had heard of the ability to control the blood in others' bodies. According to Su Miao, if Bayu wanted to, couldn't she make the blood in others' bodies flow backward or even explode? Under the arena, Qin Xuan looked at the expressionless Bayu on the stage and sighed helplessly. He knew that this day would come. Chapter 3:18. The ability to control blood? Does such a magical ability really exist in this world? As far as I know, the ability to control blood once appeared during the Great Chaos and was recorded in the unofficial history. However, this ability was short-lived and disappeared after causing a huge sensation. If Bayu really has the ability to control blood, then it's really amazing. This news will definitely shock the whole world. Hearing the commentator's exclamation, the audience's curiosity was greatly aroused and even suppressed their previous shock and anxiety. What kind of impact would such a magical ability have on today's world? No matter what the audience thought, the match in the arena was still going on. Although Su Miao had distanced herself from Bayu, the arena was only so big. Bayu soon forced Su Miao to the edge of the arena. Looking at the nervous Su Miao, Bayu once again controlled the blood in Su Miao's body. The moment Baiyu launched the attack, Su Miao could clearly feel that the blood in her body began to become irritable and violently tumbled like magma, causing a great burden on her body. Su Miao who had been mentally prepared, almost instantly used the spiritual power in her body to suppress this restlessness. However, in this way, she could only use a small part of her spiritual power in battle. Whoosh! Baiyu's figure approached Su Miao, like a ghost. She looked at Su Miao, indifferently, and raised her hand to punch. This simple action made Su Miao, unable to dodge, and could only take it head-on. Puff! Su Miao was seriously injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body fell straight back and fell out of the arena. Looking at Su Miao, who fell to the ground, Baiyu pursed her lips slightly and said, "It doesn't help that you have discovered my ability." Hearing Baiyu's words, Su Miao, smiled sadly. Indeed, as Baiyu said, even if she discovered Baiyu's ability, there was no way to deal with it. After the referee announced Baiyu's victory, the atmosphere at the scene was extremely strange. Anyone could see that Su Miao couldn't dodge Baiyu's attack in the end because the blood in her body was being controlled. She couldn't control herself and could only passively take the beating. When Su Miao opened her mouth to spit out blood, the blood that should have splashed onto Baiyu strangely turned in the air and fell to the ground on the left. It was extremely strange. At this point, no one doubted Su Miao's judgment. Baiyu indeed had the ability to control blood. This was an ability that could dictate the life and death of others at will. Qin Chuan sighed as he watched Baiyu slowly walk down from the arena. He said to Baiyu, "You shouldn't have been so impulsive. When facing Su Miao, Baiyu should have fought in a normal way. Even if it was a little difficult, she should have been able to defeat Su Miao." Now, although Baiyu dealt with Su Miao cleanly, she had caused a lot of trouble for herself. "I'll continue in the next round." Baiyu glanced at Qin Chuan and said, "Since I've already been exposed, there's no need to hide anything." Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said, "You did it on purpose?" Baiyu didn't answer Qin Chuan's question. She only said indifferently, "I don't want to see you too tired." If she didn't use the attribute ability of the talent rune, Baiyu could at most display 60% of her combat strength. It would be difficult to win against a strong opponent. However, if she used the attribute ability of the talent rune, everything would be different. It was no exaggeration to say that no one in the Foundation establishment stage was Baiyu's opponent. However, in this way, Baiyu would expose too many things and might encounter some unnecessary trouble. When he heard Baiyu's answer, Qin Chuan understood that the reason Baiyu exposed these things was because she didn't want him to shoulder everything alone. Facing the gentleness hidden under Baiyu's indifferent face, Qin Chuan's mood was somewhat complicated. He looked at Baiyu and asked, "Do you know what kind of trouble you'll bring to yourself in order to help me save a bit of energy?" "That's my trouble, not yours." Baiyu still insisted on her idea. It was fine as long as she could save Qin Chuan some energy. As for the rest, it wasn't within her scope of consideration. Qin Chuan still wanted to say something, but Baiyu had already turned and walked back to the arena. Clearly, Baiyu didn't want to continue arguing with Qin Chuan about this topic. Qin Chuan sighed helplessly when he saw Baiyu return to the arena. Everything about this girl is good, but her temper is too stubborn, too stubborn. Lu Zi stood beside Qin Chuan. Looking at the helpless expression on Qin Chuan's face, she said to Qin Chuan in a slightly complicated tone, "Baiyu is doing this out of kindness. She cares about you. That's why she did this." "I know, but she's really too reckless." Qin Chuan sighed again. "She really makes people worry." On the other side, Su Kuang held the pale Su Miao in his arms and sent her to the medical staff. Su Miao looked at Su Kuang's face and whispered, "It's so nice to be held by you like this. Don't talk. Rest well. I'll help you fight back." Su Kuang looked at Su Miao seriously. "Her ability is ineffective against me." Su Miao nodded, "I believe in you." After handing Su Miao over to the medical staff, Su Kuang turned and walked towards the arena. He was the last face of the Divine Sword Academy. No matter what, he couldn't fall. Now, Only the little sword celestial, Su Kuang, has yet to fight. The Black Moon Combat Academy hasn't changed their representative, and Baiyu is still fighting. In the previous 2 battles, Baiyu didn't waste much energy and easily defeated her opponents. Now that she's facing the little sword celestial, she won't be instantly killed, right? If Baiyu can easily insta-kill little sword immortal Su Kuang, then her ability to control blood is simply too heaven-defying. Compared to an insta-kill situation, I would rather see an evenly matched contest. Hearing the commentator's words, the audience couldn't help but look forward to the next match. The Divine Sword Academy was one of the favorites to win the championship. Would they defeat their opponents and meet the first Academy of Star Dragon in the finals, or would they be defeated by the Black Moon Combat Academy? Su Kuang slowly ascended the arena. He calmly looked at Baiyu and lightly said, "You're very powerful. Your ability is very strange and terrifying. I'm very happy to be able to fight with you." Baiyu indifferently looked at Su Kuang. She wasn't moved by Su Kuang's words at all. In her heart, there was only the word win. As for whether she was happy or not, it didn't matter. Chapter 319. 6 Great Academies Ranking Tournament, Semifinals, Godsword Academy versus Black Moon Combat Academy, Su Kuang versus Baiyu. Begin. Toot toot toot. When the whistle sounded, Baiyu didn't move. Similarly, Su Kuang was quite calm. He slowly pulled out the black longsword at his waist and pointed the tip of the unremarkable longsword at Baiyu. He lightly said, "This sword was personally forged by me. It has been with me for 10 years now. It's called the Berserk Sword." Speaking of the Berserk Sword, Su Kuang's face couldn't help but reveal a touch of pride. Ever since the Milky Way sword became famous, the deity Sword Villa had become popular to forge their own natal swords since they were young. However, after the death of Su Inha, it was difficult to continue and declined. Today, there were very few people in the deity Sword Villa who still followed this path, and Su Kuang was the most outstanding young representative. Su Kuang had always hoped that one day he could become a powerful sword cultivator like Su Inha. He had been working hard in this direction and had achieved good results. It was also because of this that he was fancied by the Sword Immortal and received the title of Little Sword Immortal. Now, on this stage, facing such a strange and mysterious opponent like Baiyu, Su Kuang didn't think of hiding any trump cards. He wanted to go all out and defeat all his next opponents. He introduced the Berserk Sword to Baiyu because he wanted to make it famous today. Buzz. As if sensing Su Kuang's intention, Berserk Sword's sword suddenly trembled slightly. This trembling became faster and faster, and the sound became louder and louder. Gradually, it formed a unique sword cry, which began to affect the spirit chi fluctuations on the stage. Seeing this scene, those who had some understanding of sword cultivators couldn't help but exclaim, "Sword spirit!" The Berserk Sword in Su Kuang's hand actually gave birth to a sword spirit. The commentator's eyes were extremely shocked as he looked at the trembling Berserk Sword in Su Kuang's hand. He exclaimed, "Could it be that Su Kuang wants to repeat the legend of Su Inha?" Everyone was familiar with Su Inha's legendary sword cultivator. Back then, the Milky Way sword had given birth to a sword spirit, which was why it was able to become a Dao weapon later on. Although the Berserk Sword was still a low-grade magic treasure, it had the potential to become a Dao artifact due to the birth of a sword spirit. The Berserk Sword was personally forged by Su Kuang and nurtured for many years. It has long become Su Kuang's life source sword. Now that it has given birth to a sword spirit, it has immeasurable benefits for Su Kuang. I dare say that in less than 100 years, Su Kuang's name will be engraved on the Star Dragon tablet. The Star Dragon stele was originally an ordinary mountain wall, but it became famous because the names of nascent soul cultivators were engraved on it. Since the founding of the Star Dragon Federation, the names of all nascent soul cultivators were engraved on the Star Dragon stele. Whenever a new name appeared on the Star Dragon stele, it meant that a new nascent soul cultivator was born in the Star Dragon Federation. Su Kuang's talent was already amazing. Now, With the help of the berserk sword that had nurtured a sword spirit, Su Kuang would definitely become a nascent soul cultivator within 100 years. His name would also appear on the Star Dragon stele. Originally, I was more optimistic about Baiyu in this battle. But now that Su Kuang has revealed his trump card, I don't think Baiyu can win. We don't have the final say on who wins and who loses in this battle. They have the final say. Just when the audience and commentators were amazed by the appearance of the sword spirit, Baiyu on the stage acted like an outsider. She was not affected in the slightest. She was still so indifferent and calm. Looking at Baiyu's expressionless face, Su Kuang slightly pursed his lips and said, "Then, I'm coming." Before Su Kuang's voice fell, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly burst out from his body. The surging power was like an endless river. It surged in Su Kuang's body and emitted an astonishing pressure. Buzz. Under Su Kuang's powerful eruption, even the solid stage couldn't help but tremble. No one would have thought that before the battle even started, Su Kuang had already released his complete form and erupted with such astonishing power. Below the stage, Qin Xuan saw this scene and couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. The aura on Su Kuang's body was so strong that it made Qin Xuan feel as if he was facing a gold core stage expert. This is a sword cultivator. Once he goes all out, he will be unstoppable. Chen Changxing looked at Su Kuang's expression on the stage with an extremely dignified expression. At this time, even if Su Kuang is facing a gold core stage expert, he might still have the power to fight. Unless the gold core stage expert also goes all out, he won't be able to defeat Su Kuang in a short period of time. Hearing Chen Changxing's words, Qin Xuan couldn't help but look at Baiyu on the other side. Looking at the expressionless Baiyu without any movements, Qin Xuan began to worry for Baiyu. Believe in Baiyu, she will be fine. Lu Zi looked at Qin Xuan with a complicated expression and said, "She won't let you down." Facing Lu Zi's comforting words, Qin Xuan could only nod his head and force himself to calm down. He believed that Baiyu could handle everything well. Qin family. Qin Haoshuan looked at the crystal screen and couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration on his face. However, looking at Su Kuang through the crystal screen, he actually felt a trace of crisis in his heart. Su Kuang's strength was far beyond his expectations. I really didn't expect that Su Kuang would actually be forced to use his full strength in the semifinals. Qin Haoshuan's eyes couldn't help but look at the calm Baiyu and said softly, "The ability to control blood is really a rare ability. This person must have attracted a lot of interest. I wonder if the Black Moon Combat Academy can protect her." This year's 6 Great Academies ranking tournament is really getting more and more interesting. How terrifying! Yi Qingning looked at Baiyu with an extremely solemn expression. In her opinion, the most terrifying person wasn't Su Kuang, who had erupted with such a powerful strength, but Baiyu, who was able to remain absolutely calm in the face of such a powerful Su Kuang. She didn't believe that Baiyu couldn't see how terrifying Su Kuang was. In her opinion, there is only one reason why Baiyu could remain so calm and rational. That was because Baiyu had enough confidence to defeat Su Kuang. Are all the people from the Black Moon Combat Academy so interesting? Maybe it's not a bad thing to meet them in the finals. In a luxurious mansion, a tall figure sat on a sofa. His eyes were slightly subtle as he looked at the crystal screen in front of him. The corner of his mouth slightly rose, revealing a playful smile. "I want information on this girl, from her birth until now. The more detailed, the better. I hope she's not what I think she is." Chapter 320. When his power had reached its peak, Su Kuang slowly looked at Baiyu and said in a deep voice, "Then, I'm coming." Before Su Kuang's voice even fell, his figure had already disappeared from his original position. In the next moment, he appeared in front of Baiyu. The pitch-black berserk sword in his hand transformed into a long black dragon that suddenly attacked Baiyu's abdomen. Before the sword even got close to Baiyu, the invincible sword intent had already swept over. At this moment, facing Su Kuang's powerful attack, Baiyu didn't retreat or dodge. Instead, she directly grabbed the blade with her palm. Clang! Flesh and blood collided with the sharp metal blade, producing a crisp sound of collision. The powerful sword actually stopped when it was less than 10 centimeters away from Bai Yu's abdomen. Su Kuang's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the white hand that was holding the sword. His face was filled with shock, and he no longer had his previous confidence and arrogance. "You actually grabbed the sword?" Su Kuang asked Bai Yu in disbelief. Was this person invulnerable to swords and spears? "That's not it." Bai Yu calmly looked at Su Kuang and slowly released her right hand that was holding the sword. When she raised her hand, Su Kuang finally saw that it wasn't Bai Yu's hand that had stopped the sword, but rather a pool of blood that was wrapped around the sword. That pool of blood was connected to Bai Yu's right palm by a thread of blood. Clearly, this blood came from Bai Yu. Seeing this scene on the stage, whether it was the commentators, the audience, or even the Black Moon Combat Academy students below the stage, they were all stunned. Who would have thought that the berserk sword that had already given birth to a sword spirit and was supported by an invincible sword intent would be stopped by Bai Yu with such a simple method? This is really too shocking. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I definitely wouldn't have believed that this was real. Bai Yu actually used her blood to block the berserk sword. If this was just a simple stab, I wouldn't be so surprised. However, this berserk sword has already given birth to a sword spirit. Even under Su Kuang's personal control, it was still blocked. Just how much power does this pool of blood contain? I feel that Bai Yu is definitely the biggest dark horse in this year's 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. She's also one of the strongest. Even Qin Xuan might not be able to compare to her. Just as the commentators were amazed by Bai Yu's performance, the audience couldn't help but crazily shout. They couldn't think of any other way to express the excitement and shock in their hearts. Little sword deity Su Kuang, who is known to have the strongest attack power in the younger generation, was actually blocked so easily. How could they remain calm? Qin Xuan looked at Bai Yu's figure on the stage with an extremely complicated expression. He pursed his lips and said, "She is indeed very strong." From the time he met Bai Yu, Qin Xuan had always known that she was very strong, super strong. However, this kind of strength didn't give her a sense of security. It would even cause some unnecessary trouble. Therefore, Qin Xuan had always asked Bai Yu to hide her strength and keep a low profile as much as possible. She didn't want to attract anyone's attention. If he had known that something like this would happen, Qin Xuan definitely wouldn't have let Bai Yu participate in the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. However, it was a bit too late to say anything now. Although Su Kuang was shocked by Bai Yu's amazing performance, he didn't lose his mind. He quickly came back to his senses and tried to pull the sword out of the pool of blood. He thought it would be very difficult, but who knew that Sang Xiang would succeed so easily? Patter. After the sword was pulled out, the pool of blood seemed to have lost its support and fell to the ground powerlessly. It splattered everywhere and turned from its original bright red color to a faint pink. Seeing the change in color, Su Kuang seemed to have thought of something. He looked up at Bai Yu and said, "You used up the power of this blood to block my sword, right?" Bai Yu remained silent in the face of Su Kuang's question. She took a step forward and waved her hand. Su Kuang felt the blood in his body start to riot uncontrollably. At the same time, Bai Yu's sword approached Su Kuang. Sword intent suppression. Su Kuang didn't hesitate to use his sword intent to suppress the blood riot. At the same time, he swung his sword and slashed at Bai Yu's waist. This time, Bai Yu didn't use her blood to block the sword. Instead, she chose to dodge to the side. Seeing this, Su Kuang immediately shouted in a low voice, "Sure enough, you can't use that kind of power at will." If Bai Yu could use her blood to block any attack, then no one in the same realm would be her opponent. It was impossible for such a heaven-defying person to exist in this world. Berserk's sword intent, slaughter, along with Su Kuang's angry shout. Surging spiritual power gushed out from the berserk sword. Under the terrifying killing intent, it emitted an extremely shocking power fluctuation and slashed at Bai Yu. Facing Su Kuang's powerful attack, Bai Yu's right palm suddenly gushed out a large amount of blood. The blood condensed into a blood-colored Tang saber in the air and brazenly met the incoming sword chi. Rumble. The collision between the blood-colored saber and the sword chi suddenly erupted with an earth-shattering roar. The entire stage shook crazily as if there was an earthquake. Sand and stones flew, and the wind whistled. If it weren't for the protection of the defensive array around the stage, perhaps the world would have changed color. Su Kuang looked at the blood-colored Tang saber in Bai Yu's hand with a solemn expression. After the collision just now, the color of the Tang saber in Bai Yu's hand had clearly become lighter. Bai Yu's face had also become paler. Obviously, although Bai Yu's move was strange and overbearing, it consumed a lot of her energy. As long as they continued to fight like this, Bai Yu would definitely be the first to be unable to hold on. "You've lost." Su Kuang roared again and slashed out with the berserk sword in his hand. Sharp sword chi poured out like rain. In a short moment, 180 sword chi shot out. Facing Su Kuang's fierce attack, the blood-colored Tang saber in Bai Yu's hand suddenly dissipated and turned into a thin shield in front of Bai Yu, blocking all the 180 sword chi. The price of this was that the blood turned a light red, as if it was on the verge of collapse. Seeing the change in the blood, Su Kuang's face once again revealed an expression of as expected. Then, without hesitation, he launched another attack at Bai Yu. As the sword chi swept out, the defensive array around the stage actually let out a wail as if it couldn't bear the burden. Chapter 3:21. Berserk Sword Intent, Furious Charge. Su Kuang roared, and the berserk sword in his hand suddenly spun. The spirit force fluctuations were extremely violent. With an ear-piercing hum, the berserk sword fiercely stabbed into the blood-colored shield in front of Bai Yu. The powerful impact almost instantly pierced through the blood-colored shield's protection and rushed straight toward Bai Yu. The moment the blood-colored shield was broken, Bai Yu's figure had already moved quickly to the left. The fierce sword chi wreaked havoc and turned everything in front of her into flying ashes. If it weren't for the defensive glyph array, not to mention the stage, even the audience would have been cut off. The referee, who could have stood aside and watched the battle, had no choice but to take action at this time. He used his spirit force to maintain the stability of the defensive glyph array. If the defensive glyph array really broke and hurt the audience, then his position as a referee would end. The moment the blood-colored shield shattered, Bai Yu's face couldn't help but become paler. Her usually expressionless face couldn't help but reveal a touch of pain. Obviously, the shattering of the blood-colored shield had some effect on Bai Yu. "Blood blade!" Bai Yu roared and blood gushed out of her right palm again. It turned into a slender spike and stabbed towards Su Kuang like lightning. Seeing this, Su Kuang immediately raised his sword to block. However, the spike suddenly turned in the air and pierced Su Kuang's shoulder before he could react. The moment the spike pierced Su Kuang's shoulder, the blood on Su Kuang's shoulder was uncontrollably attracted by the spike. It crazily gushed out of the wound and turned into a blood-colored palm full of spikes. It fiercely grabbed Su Kuang's shoulder and crazily extracted the blood and spirit force in Su Kuang's body. Ahem! The moment his shoulder was heavily injured, Su Kuang's face immediately turned pale, and he couldn't help but let out a painful groan. He endured the pain on his shoulder and raised his hand to stab at Bai Yu again. At the same time, the blood-colored palm that tightly grabbed Su Kuang's shoulder suddenly left Su Kuang's shoulder and appeared in front of Bai Yu almost instantly. It turned into a blood-colored shield and blocked Su Kuang's sword. Seeing this scene, Su Kuang immediately retreated and pulled far away from Bai Yu. Bai Yu did not take advantage of the situation to pursue him. Instead, she chose to stay where she was and bide her time. When the battle on the stage temporarily entered a standoff stage, the commentator who had been nervously watching the match finally had the chance to exclaim in surprise. Terrifying. It was really too terrifying. Whether it was Bai Yu or Su Kuang, both of their performances were terrifying. Bai Yu's ability to control blood is mysterious and strange, while Su Kuang's berserk sword intent is fierce and fierce. Both of them have displayed their strengths to the fullest, and there is almost no flaw. This is really rare. Su Kuang is the sword cultivator most proficient in attacking among the younger generation. It's very difficult for an average person to withstand his full power for so long. Although Bai Yu's condition doesn't look good, it's already commendable that she could hold on until now. However, Bai Yu's strange blood spike seemed to have caused a lot of damage to Su Kuang. Otherwise, Su Kuang wouldn't have given up the opportunity to continue suppressing Bai Yu and chose to withdraw. Clearly, Su Kuang was trying to buy time to resolve the abnormality in his body. Yes, Bai Yu also didn't make any new moves. Clearly, she is also recovering her strength. The choice of both sides can be said to be very tacit. I think that the two of them will probably use their ultimate moves next. The outcome of this battle may be revealed in the next moment. In the audience, all the spectators looked at the two people on the stage with nervous eyes. Although this battle was not very exciting, it was definitely the most nerve-wracking, novel, and strange match. Between the two sides, one had the mysterious ability to control blood, and the other was a sword cultivator with powerful offensive abilities. Between the two, no matter who won, the spectators would not be surprised. Below the stage, Qin Chuan looked at Bai Yu with extremely nervous eyes. He was very hesitant in his heart. He felt that Bai Yu had done enough. As long as she admitted defeat now, he could definitely defeat Su Kuang and win the last ticket to the finals. However, he knew very well that Bai Yu was not willing to admit defeat. Boss, believe in Bai Yu. Let her continue to fight. Chen Changxing seemed to have seen through Qin Chuan's thoughts and couldn't help but persuade Qin Chuan. He could also see that Bai Yu's current state was very bad. If she continued to fight, it would be very difficult to win the match. However, at least there was still a chance to win. If Bai Yu were to admit defeat like this, she would definitely not be willing. Hearing Chen Changxing's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but sigh. This feeling of being in a dilemma was really uncomfortable. On the stage, Su Kuang was slightly gasping for breath. He couldn't help but look sideways at his left shoulder. At this time, his left shoulder was almost completely rotten, but the strange thing was that there was almost no blood flowing out. There was only pale flesh and bone. He tried to clench his fist, but he couldn't feel anything. She actually drained all the blood from my left shoulder in an instant. This ability is really terrifying. Su Kuang had a lingering fear in his heart. If he hadn't suppressed his left shoulder with sword intent in time, perhaps Bai Yu wouldn't have just drained the blood from his left shoulder. Once he lost too much blood, even a Foundation establishment cultivator's life would be in danger. I have to end this quickly. At this time, Su Kuang could no longer delay. In his current state, if he continued to delay, once Bai Yu found a chance to extract the blood in his body again, he would really lose. Huh! Su Kuang shouted in a low voice. He raised his right hand and threw the berserk sword in his hand into the air. With his mind, he controlled the berserk sword to go straight into the sky. Immediately, a terrifying sword intent landed on the stage. Even the audience outside the defense array was greatly affected. Seeing this scene, everyone knew that Su Kuang was going to use a big move. Seeing this scene, Bai Yu naturally wasn't willing to sit still and wait for death. However, she didn't continue to control the blood. Instead, she took out a talisman pen and began to inscribe a talisman array. When they saw this scene, the audience was instantly curious. What sort of talisman array would Bai Yu use to deal with this battle? Qin Chuan was slightly astonished. He glanced at Long Xiao and asked, "What talisman array is Bai Yu most skilled in?" "I don't know." Long Xiao shook her head and said, "Besides participating in the talisman array master test, I've never seen her utilize talisman arrays in battle." Qin Chuan was stunned, and he couldn't help but turn to look at Bai Yu, who was concentrating fully on inscribing talisman arrays. Could it be that this fellow still has a trump card? Chapter 323. When all the dust settled, what appeared in front of everyone was an extremely shocking scene. In the center of the stadium, there was a huge circular pit with the ring as the center. Everything within a radius of 1,000 meters was affected. Even the auditorium had cracks and collapsed. The horror of the Milky Way sword intent was terrifying. In the auditorium, the audience looked at the deep pit in the center of the stadium in horror and gasped. Was this really the power of a cultivator in the Foundation establishment stage? Perhaps even a cultivator in the Gold Core stage would be at risk of being instantly killed. Just when the audience was shocked, the staff had already entered the deep pit and began to search for traces of Baiyu and Su Quan. Although the possibility of these two people surviving was slim, the search and rescue operation still had to be done. Soon, the search and rescue personnel found the figures of Su Quan and Baiyu in the deep pit. But what surprised them was that these two people still looked the same as when the Milky Way sword intent fell. They seemed to be unscathed in the terrifying explosion. Although it was hard to believe, the staff reluctantly accepted this reality. They brought the two out of the deep pit and sent them to the medical staff. At this time, the audience in the auditorium saw that Baiyu and Su Quan were almost rescued safe and sound. They couldn't help but exclaim, "They're still alive." The referee was also a little shocked. He originally thought that Baiyu and Su Quan were dead for sure, and he was already mentally prepared to bear the wrath of the deity Sword Villa. Who would have thought that the two people in the center of the explosion were still alive and not even injured at all? If it weren't for the deep pit and the chaos in the stadium in front of him, the referee would have thought that he was hallucinating just now. Whoosh! Qinchuan's figure landed beside the referee. He looked at the unconscious Baiyu and anxiously asked the medical staff, "Doctor, how's her situation?" The doctor looked at Baiyu with a strange look and said to Qinchuan, "We have done a preliminary examination. Baiyu fainted because of excessive exhaustion. There are no serious injuries on her body. However, we need to do a more detailed examination to get a final conclusion." On the other side, the doctor who examined Su Quan also came to a similar conclusion. Most of the injuries on Su Quan's body were suffered before the Milky Way sword intent fell. There was no danger to his life. In other words, Baiyu and Su Quan hadn't suffered any harm from the explosion of sword intent from before. At this moment, everyone from the Holy Sword Academy also arrived at the scene and surrounded Su Quan. When they saw that Su Quan's breathing was stable and that his life was not in danger, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. If Su Quan died here, they really didn't know how to explain it to their elders. Su Miao was so emotional that she cried bitterly. Only God knew how scared she was just now. Perhaps it has something to do with Baiyu's last talisman array. The referee rubbed his chin and analyzed. At that time, I took a good look at that talisman array. That talisman array didn't have any destructive power. Now that I think about it, it might be a protective talisman array. At this time, seeing that Baiyu and Su Quan's lives were not in danger, they didn't suffer any serious injuries, the referee breathed a sigh of relief and began to analyze. Judging from the current situation, his speculation should be the most reasonable. However, Qinchuan didn't think so. In his opinion, the reason why Baiyu and Su Quan were unharmed must be related to the rune sword in his brain. When the results of Baiyu and Su Quan's examination were announced, both the audience at the scene and the audience in front of the crystal screen were stunned. Who would have thought that Baiyu and Su Quan could survive such a terrifying explosion, and they were almost unharmed? But thinking about it carefully, Su Quan could manifest the Milky Way sword intent. As the person who released the Milky Way sword intent, it was understandable that Su Quan wasn't injured. After all, no one would kill themselves. But Baiyu was also unharmed, which made people somewhat puzzled. In the end, just as the referee had speculated, the majority of the audience attributed Baiyu's unscathed to that mysterious talisman array. At this time, everyone was discussing the soul-stirring battle. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this battle was definitely the most thrilling and destructive match since the start of the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. Even if the previous 6 Great Academies ranking tournaments were included, the level of excitement could definitely be ranked in the top 10. However, there was another point that everyone was most concerned about. Now that Baiyu and Su Quan were both unconscious, this match was considered a draw. This meant that no one from the Divine Sword Academy could continue to fight, and the Black Moon Combat Academy still had Qin Xuan, who had yet to appear. In other words, the Black Moon Combat Academy had won this match for the last ticket to the finals. Thinking of this result, the audience couldn't help but exclaim in surprise once again. At the beginning, not many people were optimistic about the Black Moon Combat Academy. After all, Qin Xuan's name as the Little Sword Fairy was known by almost everyone. No one thought that Qin Xuan would be able to defeat Su Kuang. But who would have thought that the person fighting Su Kuang in the end wasn't Qin Xuan, but Bai Yu? In this semifinal match, Qin Xuan hadn't even made a move. From this point of view, it seemed that the Black Moon Combat Academy had the upper hand in terms of overall strength. The referee stood in the air above the deep pit and looked around the stadium. He then announced in a clear voice, "In this match, the Black Moon Combat Academy's Bai Yu and the Divine Sword Academy's Su Kuang are both unconscious. The final result is a draw. Because the Divine Sword Academy's 5 contestants have already stepped onto the stage and are no longer qualified to continue fighting, while the Black Moon Combat Academy still has 1 contestant who is qualified to fight. The final winner of this match is the Black Moon Combat Academy." Although everyone had already guessed that this would be the result, when the referee announced the final result, the audience couldn't help but become excited. The Black Moon Combat Academy had overcome all the difficulties and had finally obtained the final ticket to the finals. After this match, the Black Moon Combat Academy would face off against the Star Dragon Academy's #1 academy. Qin Xuan would stand in front of Qin Haoshuan and fulfill the agreement between them, engaging in a life-and-death battle. For a moment, everyone's eyes involuntarily focused on Qin Xuan's body. In the upcoming finals, would Qin Xuan be able to complete the miracle of a comeback, or would Qin Haoshuan be able to protect the Qin family's prestige and defeat Qin Xuan? The answer would soon be revealed. The audience couldn't wait to see the clash between these 2 geniuses. Chapter 3:24. Qin Xuan didn't care about the result of the competition or the audience's reaction. He just wanted to stay by Bai Yu's side and not leave her side. "Qin Xuan, we need to send Bai Yu to the examination room for a full examination. You should wait outside." The doctor looked at Qin Xuan, who was following closely behind them, and said to Qin Xuan, "According to the rules, you can't enter the examination room." Qin Xuan frowned slightly and said, "Why?" "The examination room is a sterile environment. Even if we enter, we have to go through a series of sterilization procedures and wear the corresponding protective clothing," the doctor patiently explained to Qin Xuan. "It's very troublesome, so you shouldn't go in." Hearing the doctor's explanation, Qin Xuan shook his head and said, "Absolutely not. Either I go in with you, or I take Bai Yu away and don't do any more in-depth examinations." The doctor looked at Qin Xuan with some surprise and said, "Are you worried that we will harm your girlfriend?" Qin Xuan didn't explain the matter of his girlfriend at this time, but said to the doctor with a firm attitude, "There won't be a third choice besides these 2. After Bai Yu exposed her ability, Qin Xuan had a bad feeling in his heart. He didn't want any accidents to happen to Bai Yu. So now that Bai Yu is unconscious and unable to resist, he absolutely couldn't allow Bai Yu to disappear from his sight. Seeing Qin Xuan's firm attitude, the doctor had no choice but to agree to let Qin Xuan enter the examination room together. If something happened to Bai Yu's body because of not letting Qin Xuan enter the examination room, she couldn't escape the blame. Just as the doctor was about to speak, a middle-aged man in a suit came from not far away. He looked at Qin Xuan and said lightly, "Rules are rules. You can't enter the examination room." Qin Xuan slightly raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He looked the middle-aged man up and down and asked, "Who are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you can't enter the examination room." The middle-aged man didn't answer Qin Xuan's question. Obviously, he didn't think much of Qin Xuan. "All right then, we won't accept the inspection." The appearance of the middle-aged man made Qin Xuan instinctively feel a trace of danger. He decided to take Bai Yu and leave immediately. Even if the middle-aged man allowed him to enter the examination room, he still had to leave. "What do you think this is? Do you think you can come and go as you please? If anything happens to Bai Yu's body, who will bear the responsibility?" The middle-aged man snorted and said to the doctor standing on the side, "What are you still standing there for? Bring Bai into the examination room immediately." The middle-aged man stopped before he finished speaking. He looked at Qin Chuan, who was emitting a shocking energy fluctuation from his body, with some surprise in his eyes. He asked, "What are you trying to do by releasing your complete form here?" Qin Chuan calmed down. The doctor looked at Qin Chuan nervously. At this moment, no matter how slow she was, she could tell that something was wrong. "I'm very calm." Qin Chuan looked at the middle-aged man coldly and said in a low voice, "If I want to take her away, no one can stop me." Hee, is this how a little guy in the early stage of foundation establishment talks to a senior in the golden core stage? The middle-aged man sneered and pointed a finger at Qin Chuan. He said coldly, "Do you believe that I can crush you to death with one finger? Then do you believe that I can crush you to death without even lifting a finger?" A slightly cold voice sounded in the middle-aged man's ear. When everyone heard this voice, they subconsciously turned to look in the direction of the voice. They saw a tall figure in a white qipao slowly walk over and stand beside Qin Chuan. When he saw this figure, Qin Chuan's eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of pleasant surprise. He cheered, "Teacher, you're here." The teacher that Qin Chuan was riding was none other than Ningya. She had traveled thousands of miles from the Black Moon Combat Academy to Star Dragon City and had watched the entire competition through the crystal screen outside the stadium. She knew that someone would definitely make a move on Bai, so she had specially rushed over. Nothing had happened before, so she hadn't shown herself. Now that she saw the middle-aged man threaten Qin Chuan, she couldn't help but show herself. "If I didn't come, wouldn't my student be bullied?" Ningya sneered and asked the middle-aged man, "You just said that you wanted to crush my student. I'll give you the chance now. Make your move." The middle-aged man looked at Ningya, who was standing in front of him. His expression was extremely solemn, as if he was facing a great enemy. He said in a deep voice, "Ningya, I know that you're very powerful, but you're still just one person. Do you know who's behind me? Since the person behind you is so powerful, then you should have him come to me personally. You don't have the qualifications to threaten me." Ningya smiled disdainfully. "However, do you think that the person behind you has the guts to stand in front of me? Do you really think that I, Ningya, am easy to bully?" Hearing Ningya's words, the middle-aged man's face fiercely twitched, but he didn't dare to say anything else. He couldn't afford to offend Ningya, and the person behind him definitely wouldn't want to offend Ningya either. A talisman array master who had mastered a grade 4 battle array was definitely not someone to be trifled with. "If you have nothing else to say, then I'll take that person away." Ningya slowly walked to the side of the bed and looked at the sleeping Bai. She sighed softly. "I really don't know if you're lucky or unlucky to possess such ability." As she spoke, Ningya gently lifted Bai from the bed. When she saw Bai unconsciously frown, she turned around and handed Bai over to Qin Chuan. When she saw Bai's tightly furrowed brows relax, she glanced playfully at Qin Chuan and said, "It looks like she trusts you a lot. Teacher, let's go first." Qin Chuan laughed bitterly. This was someone else's territory after all, and it wasn't good to be too arrogant. Ningya turned to look at the middle-aged man standing to the side and said indifferently, "Go back and tell the person behind you for me. Also, help me tell the others that if they want to take someone away from me, they'll have to be prepared to fight me to the death. Although I'm only at the complete golden core stage, my teacher isn't dead yet." When he heard Ningya's words, the middle-aged man's expression instantly turned ugly. Although Ningya was a powerful battle array master, her cultivation was only at the complete golden core stage, which wasn't considered strong. However, Ningya's teacher was different. He was the dean of the Black Moon Combat Academy, a peak almighty whose name had been engraved on the Star Dragon tablet for more than 300 years. Now that Ningya had even mentioned this person, unless someone wanted to start a war between nascent soul stage cultivators, no one would have the guts to casually make a move against Bai. This was the deterrent power of an almighty cultivator with a domain. Chapter 325. The grand semi-finals had finally come to an end. The Black Moon Combat Academy had defeated the Divine Sword Academy and obtained the final ticket to the finals. They would face off against the Star Dragon Academy on the 10th of June and compete with the Star Dragon Academy for the championship trophy of the 6 Great Academies. During the semi-finals, the Red Dragon Gymnasium had been greatly damaged. Therefore, the final venue was changed to the Federation's largest World Gymnasium. As the Federation's largest gymnasium, the World Gymnasium had always been closed to the public. It was only open to the public during the Federation's National Day ceremony that was held once every 10 years. This time, the Department of Education was able to apply for the World Gymnasium as the venue for the finals. This was something that many people had not expected. Compared to the Red Dragon Gymnasium, the World Gymnasium could hold more than 300,000 spectators at the same time. It had an excellent all-around view and would definitely provide the best viewing experience for the audience. Therefore, in less than 10 seconds after the tickets for the finals went on sale, all 300,000 tickets were sold out. In the scalper market, the price of a single ticket was inflated to the sky. Originally, the finals had attracted the attention of countless people because of the bet between Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan. Now that the World Gymnasium had been opened to the public, it could be said that the finals had attracted the attention of countless people. Even those who were not interested in the 6 Great Academies qualifiers had a clear understanding of the finals. On the internet, there were countless discussion posts about the finals. The most interesting thing was that the Red Dragon Gymnasium had not been repaired immediately after it was damaged. This was because many people who were watching the competition through the crystal screen wanted to see the deep pit with their own eyes. Therefore, the Red Dragon Gymnasium had become a popular attraction in Star Dragon City. Every day, there would be an endless stream of people coming to see the deep pit. The match between Bai Yu and Su Kuang had become a classic in the hearts of the audience. However, all of this seemed to have nothing to do with Qin Xuan. He had rejected all of the media's interviews and all of their invitations. He had been waiting by Bai Yu's bedside, waiting for her to wake up. Ningya sat on a chair and looked at Qin Xuan, who was sitting by the bed. She asked Qin Xuan, "Are you going to keep watching over her like this? Aren't you going to rest?" "I'm not tired." Qin Xuan shook his head and said, "I am partly responsible for her becoming like this, so I have to watch over her until she wakes up. I'm curious, when did your relationship with her become so good?" Ningya looked at Qin Xuan playfully and asked, "Don't tell me you've really fallen for this little girl? What are you going to do with that senior in Lu? I heard that you have a fiancé, Yukai. Oh, right, you also have a childhood sweetheart, Wang Wenxue." Qin Xuan glanced at Ningya helplessly and said, "Teacher, you seem to be very interested in my feelings. Of course, after all, use." Ningya smiled at Qin Xuan and said, "Actually, if I had to choose, I would choose LVZ." Qin Xuan looked at Ningya in surprise and asked curiously, "Why?" Ningya looked at Qin Xuan seriously, then looked at Bai Yu, who was lying on the bed. She said to Qin Xuan, "Bai Yu is a good child, but her origin is too mysterious and complicated. She's been targeted by many people. If you stay with her, you'll encounter a lot of trouble in the future. Although your senior sister Zhou is very good to you, and her looks, figure, and talent are all excellent, she has the same problem as Bai Yu. That is, her background is too complicated. As the future leader elected by the commoners, Zhou will have to experience a lot in the future. Her path will be full of obstacles. If you stay with her, you will definitely be influenced by her and even be used by the people behind her. But Lu Zi is different. Her background is the simplest. You two have feelings for each other. If you stay with her, you'll be the most relaxed and comfortable. As for the others, I won't say much. They're not within the scope of consideration." Hearing Ningya's reasonable analysis, Qin Xuan was stunned. "Teacher, you know a lot about this. Of course, you're my disciple. Of course, I have to consider your marriage." Ningya looked at Qin Xuan with a smile and said, "In order to stay by Bai Yu's side, you even rejected Zhou Lin's invitation. Tell me, do you really like Bai Yu?" Qin Xuan was helpless. He said to Ningya, "Teacher, now is not the time to talk about this." Qin Xuan valued the girls around him very much. He regarded them as very important partners in his life. It was better to let nature take its course. That's really a pity. Ningya turned to look at Baiyu lying on the bed and said with a smile, Okay, I didn't get anything out of him. Don't pretend to be asleep. Hurry up and get up. Otherwise, who knows how long he'll worry about you. Hearing Ningya's words, Qinchuan glanced at Baiyu lying on the bed with some surprise. At the same time, Baiyu slowly opened her eyes. Her clear eyes met with Qinchuan's slightly stunned gaze. When did you wake up? Qinchuan was pleasantly surprised. For the current him, nothing made him happier than Baiyu waking up. Just now, Baiyu sat up and looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression. She said, Thank you for always staying by my side. It's what I should do. Qinchuan looked at Baiyu and said seriously, Although the result is good, I still have to say that you were really too reckless before. If it wasn't for the rune sword at the crucial moment, perhaps Baiyu would really have died. I know, but I didn't have a choice at that time. Baiyu pursed her lips and said to Qinchuan, In the end, we won. That's enough, isn't it? Qinchuan looked at Baiyu curiously and asked, How do you know that we must have one? What if I lost to Su Kuang in the end? I fainted, so Su Kuang must have fainted as well. It should be a draw. No one from the Godsword Academy can continue to fight, and we still have you. So the winner should be us. Baiyu's words were reasonable, as if she had seen the development of the matter with her own eyes. Qinchuan asked in surprise, How do you know that Su Kuang fainted? Because I fainted. Baiyu looked seriously at Qinchuan and said, Under the influence of empathy, the final result will be the same as his. Chapter 3:26. Empathize? What's that? Qinchuan looked at Baiyu in confusion. He couldn't understand what she was talking about. It's the glyph formation I inscribed. It's called empathize. Baiyu seriously explained to Qinchuan. The use of the empathize glyph formation is very simple. It can create a connection between me and Su Kuang's body. We are bound together for good or ill. Hearing Baiyu's explanation, Qinchuan asked in shock, You mean that as long as Su Kuang isn't injured, you won't be injured, and if you faint, Su Kuang will also faint, and vice versa? Baiyu nodded and said, That's right. No wonder. Qinchuan murmured. No wonder Baiyu and Su Kuang were unharmed in the explosion. It must be that when the glyph sword protected Baiyu, the empathize glyph formation also protected Su Kuang. That was why Baiyu and Su Kuang were unharmed. As for whether Baiyu's coma affected Su Kuang or Su Kuang's coma affected Baiyu, it didn't seem that important. Empathize? This is the first time I've heard of such a strange glyph formation. Ningya, who was sitting not far away, calmly looked at Baiyu and asked, Is this a glyph formation passed down in your family? Facing Ningya's question, Baiyu was silent for a moment before replying, Yes, this is a glyph formation passed down in my family. Ningya nodded and asked Baiyu, Baiyu, where's your family from? My family comes from a remote place. Baiyu lowered her head and said softly, There's nothing worth mentioning. Ningya looked deeply at Baiyu and said, Now that things have reached this point, are you still going to continue to hide it? Teacher, what are you talking about? Qinchuan frowned slightly. He felt that Ningya seemed to be deliberately targeting Baiyu. She knows very well what I'm talking about. My silly student, I'm asking this for your own good. Ningya looked at Qinchuan helplessly and said, If it wasn't because you wanted to protect her, I wouldn't be interested in prying into other people's privacy. After saying this, Ningya turned to Baiyu and said, You don't know yet, right? When you were in a coma, many big shots who were interested in you wanted to take you away. It was Qinchuan who tried his best to stop them. As Qinchuan's teacher, I naturally stand on Qinchuan's side. And you, as Qinchuan's companion, do you want Qinchuan to work for you without knowing anything about you? Hearing Ningya's words, Baiyu couldn't help but fall silent. She faintly stared at Qinchuan. After a long while, she finally spoke. I once told you that I'm a monster. Don't say any more. Qinchuan sighed and turned to Ningya. Teacher, Baiyu already told me everything. I know she's an elf. Elf. That was a creature that only existed in the legends of the historical records. Ningya looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression and said, Sometimes, what you know may not be correct. Qinchuan was stunned and looked at Baiyu. Could it be that Bai is not an elf? I lied to you, and I didn't lie to you. Bai looked at Qin Xuan and said, I'm an elf, but not the kind of elf you think I am. I'm a blood elf. Blood elf? Qin Xuan stared at Bai in shock. You're a blood elf? Blood elves were originally the royalty of the elf race. During the Great Chaos, the blood elves protected the entire elf race and weathered disaster after disaster until the end of the Great Chaos. Because of a riot, the royal blood elves suffered heavy losses. Less than 1 in 10 survived. A large number of powerhouses fell, causing the entire elf race to decline. It also caused the elf race to disappear from the world not long after becoming history. These were all things that Qin Xuan had seen in historical records. As for the specifics, he did not know. However, this did not prevent him from knowing how rare blood elves were in this world. Qin Xuan originally thought that those important figures were interested in Bai because of her unique ability to control blood. He did not expect it to be because of Bai's identity, a royal bloodline that should have disappeared in the river of history long ago. Yes, I'm a blood elf. Bai nodded and said to Qin Xuan, Actually, we blood elves never disappeared from this world. Instead, we became something else. Something dirty, bloodthirsty, and cruel. Hearing Bai's words, Qin Xuan could not help but think of the mountain ghosts in the Black Moon Forest. Those things that you call mountain ghosts are the blood elves of the royal blood elves from millions of years ago. Bai turned to look at Ningya and said, The Azure Ancient City was originally the royal city of the elf race. Ningya sighed softly and said to Bai, When the Black Moon Combat Academy was established, they found some records of the elf race in the underground ruins of the Azure Ancient City. Even now, we have not been able to decipher a tenth of it. However, it allowed us to understand some of the elven race's past. The reason why your elven race suddenly disappeared was because your royal family was tired of the war and wanted to gather the power of the entire race to build a cosmic battleship that could cross space and leave this world to find a new Pure Land. However, this plan seemed to have met with some accidents, so it failed. Yes, Bai nodded and said in a sad tone, that spaceship was called the Hope. It was supposed to be the hope of our entire race, but in the end, it became the fuse that led to the extinction of our race. I want to know where the Hope went. Ningya looked at Bai curiously. The elves were considered a powerful race back then. They shouldn't have perished so easily. Bai looked deeply at Ningya and said, The Hope has always existed in this world. However, its name was no longer the Hope, but the Star Dragon. Star Dragon, the most powerful spaceship in the Star Dragon Federation. Hearing Bai's answer, Qin Xuan was shocked. However, Ningya did not look surprised. She looked at Bai faintly and said, I guessed it. Back then, the Star Dragon appeared too suddenly. There were almost no signs. The higher-ups of the Federation announced to the public that the Star Dragon was built in secret, but we all know very well that it's just fake news. If the Star Dragon didn't appear back then, perhaps our human race would have perished during the Great Chaos. We wouldn't have been able to stop the demon race's invasion. Now, it seems that the extinction of the elves is related to us humans. Ningya looked at Bai with a subtle expression and said, So, do you hate us humans? Chapter 327. Did Bai hate humans? If it weren't for the humans' deception, the elves wouldn't have lost the hope. They wouldn't have been mercilessly slaughtered by the humans, causing the blood elves to activate the curse and fight the humans to the death. They would have evolved into mountain ghosts hiding in the depths of the Black Moon Forest. It was impossible to say that she didn't hate humans, but what was the use of hating them? Bai was silent for a moment before gently shaking her head. Those humans who deceived us and harmed us have already disappeared from this world. Hatred is meaningless. Compared to that, I hope to find a way to break the curse and help my people return to their original state. For you, breaking the curse of the elves is naturally the most important thing. Those humans who deceived you and harmed you are indeed dead, but some things will be passed down from generation to generation, including the cunning and greed of human nature. Ningya took a deep look at Bai and said, Who do you think those people who are interested in you are? Hearing Ningya's words, Qingchuan's expression couldn't help but change slightly. Who are they? Although I didn't deliberately investigate, I can guess that those who want to make a move on by you must be the upper echelons of the Star Dragon Federation. The ancient ones of the 4 great families and the 10 great sects must be involved. Ancient ones? Qingchuan frowned slightly. Who were these people? Ningya saw Qingchuan's confusion and explained to Qingchuan. The so-called ancient ones refer to those who experienced the great chaos and are still alive. Qingchuan was dumbfounded. From the great chaos until now, tens of thousands of years had passed, and there were still people who were still alive. This isn't something to be surprised about. Those ancient ones are all-powerful cultivators with long lifespans. In addition to being in a state of deep sleep for a long time, the consumption of their bodies is minimal. Naturally, living for tens of thousands of years isn't a problem. Ningya faintly told Qingchuan, "My teacher, the Dean of the Black Moon Combat Academy, is an ancient elder. However, he is different from the others. After he woke up last time, he did not enter a state of deep sleep again." Upon hearing Ningya's words, Qingchuan finally understood why the middle-aged man had such an ugly expression on his face when Ningya mentioned the old dean. The deterrence of an ancient expert who had lived since the Great Chaos era was beyond imagination. As far as I know, among the 4 great aristocratic families, the Qin family and the Yi family were already extremely powerful families during the Great Chaos. They have been passed down to this day, so these 2 families must have ancient ones, or even more than one. Among the 10 great sects, the Black Heaven sect and the Heaven Battling sect both originated during the Great Chaos. They should also have ancient elders in their sections. These 4 sects must be very familiar with Bai Yu's identity. Upon hearing this, Qingchuan's expression could not help but turn ugly. Whether it was the Qin family, the Yi family, the Black Heaven sect, or the Heaven Battling sect, they were all forces that he could not resist. If these 4 families really made a move against Bai Yu, then Bai Yu would definitely be doomed. Seeing the change in Qingchuan's expression, Ningya faintly smiled and said to Qingchuan, "However, you don't have to be too worried. With me around and my teacher's deterrence, they should not dare to act rashly. If they anger me and draw out my teacher, then their gains will not make up for their losses." The ancient elders were super powerhouses who had lived through the Great Chaos era. The deterrence they possessed was definitely not something that the current nascent soul stage could compare to. Unless it was a matter of life and death, these forces would not easily disturb the sleeping ancient elders. The old dean, who had always been awake, was an existence that these forces could not easily provoke. As the old dean's student, Ningya had used the old dean as a shield. These forces were still somewhat afraid of her. If not for this, Bai Yu would have already been taken away by these forces. "Thank you." Bai Yu looked at Ningya with a slightly complicated expression, then looked at Qingchuan. She knew that Ningya was not the kind of person who would meddle in other people's business. The reason why Ningya helped her was purely because of Qingchuan. "Don't be in a hurry to thank me. I can only deter them for a while. If you wanted to not touch you, you have to grow up." Ningya gazed at Bai Yu with a subtle gaze and said, "Perhaps you and Qingchuan will obtain a fortuitous encounter in the near future. At that time, I hope that both of you can fight side by side and return alive." Hearing this, Qingchuan asked curiously, "Teacher, what is the opportunity you are talking about? You know about the ruins of the universe, right?" Ningya looked at Qingchuan and explained faintly, "Nowadays, the major families of the Federation more or less occupy a ruin of the universe. They obtain resources and opportunities through exploring the ruins of the universe. The opportunity one mentioned just now refers to an open ruin of the universe. Its name is the Carefree Secret Realm." "Carefree Secret Realm?" Qingchuan was a little surprised. "Can you be more specific?" "To be more specific, the Carefree Secret Realm is a ruin of the universe that opens irregularly. Every time it opens, the Federation will select some young geniuses of the Foundation establishment stage to enter and explore it. The opportunities obtained will belong to them. The 6 Great Academies ranking competition can be said to be a secret selection. Those who perform well in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition can basically obtain a quota to enter the carefree secret realm. If there are no accidents, both of you will obtain a quota. At that time, not only will the human race be able to enter the carefree secret realm, but also the demon race. If you encounter the demon race, there will inevitably be a battle. However, this does not mean that you don't have to be wary of the human race. Other than the people closest to you, it's best not to trust anyone easily. As for what opportunities there are in the carefree secret realm, that will be up to you to explore on your own. I won't say much. Hearing Ningya's introduction of the carefree secret realm, Qin Chuan couldn't help but become interested in it. However, the most important thing for him right now was to protect Bai Yu and defeat Qin Haoshuan in the finals. Thinking of Qin Haoshuan, Qin Chuan looked at Ningya with a subtle gaze and asked, "Teacher, if I kill Qin Haoshuan, what will you do?" Hearing this, Ningya looked at Qin Chuan with a strange expression and said, "I know about the matter between you and Qin Haoshuan. Why must you kill him? Is there really such a deep hatred between the two of you?" Ningya only thought that the grudge between Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan originated from Qin Zhu, and this grudge had deepened in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition. It shouldn't be necessary to determine life and death. Even though Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan had already agreed to determine life and death in the finals, Ningya still didn't take it to heart. However, looking at Qin Chuan's attitude now, it was clear that he really wanted to kill Qin Haoshuan. Chapter 328. The clash between the hurricane and the flames had determined the outcome from the very beginning. Strong winds could extinguish flames, but when the flames reached a certain level, strong winds could not extinguish the flames. On the contrary, they would help the flames to grow crazily. Under the powerful attack of the annihilation storm, the several dozen-meter-tall, ferocious beast formed from the black flames abruptly grew in size. In an instant, it turned into a terrifying existence that blotted out the sun. Its scorching hot aura was like lava as it spread in all directions, evaporating and melting everything in its surroundings. Seeing that the giant flame beast had not been weakened by the annihilation storm and had instead become even stronger, Driz's face couldn't help but reveal a trace of despair. He had already been completely suppressed to death, and there was no hope for him to make a comeback. Everyone who had personally witnessed the entire process of this match could clearly feel the despair in Driz's heart. Wind against fire, especially against the extremely troublesome black flames. In terms of attributes, Drizzt was completely suppressed by Long Xiao. He couldn't extinguish Long Xiao's black flames, and could only helplessly watch as the black flames crazily grew and burned everything into nothingness. The annihilation storm was finally destroyed. The giant flame beast brazenly pounced towards Drizzt, defeating him who had already lost his will to fight and throwing him out of the stage. It didn't cause much damage to Drizzt. Long Xiao maintained her demeanor as a young lady from a noble family, and at the same time, won the enthusiastic applause of the audience. In the face of victory, Long Xiao appeared rather calm, as if she had done something insignificant. She turned her head to look at Qin Chuan, who was standing below the stage, and proudly raised her chin. Seeing Long Xiao's expression, Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As expected, women were creatures that held grudges. For this match, Star Dragon's First Academy's Drizzt has stepped out of bounds. The winner is Black Moon Combat Academy's Long Xiao. When the referee announced Long Xiao's victory, the audience erupted into enthusiastic cheers. At the same time, there were voices of regret. Drizzt was an expert at the Great Circle of Foundation Establishment. If his opponent wasn't Long Xiao, he might have lost, but he definitely wouldn't have lost so cleanly and without any ability to resist. Drizzt is a very good contestant. His strength and character are both excellent. However, it's a pity that his opponent is Long Xiao. In terms of attributes, he is completely suppressed. If not for that, he might not have lost. Yes, but it's meaningless to talk about this now. Let's wait and see who the first Academy of Star Dragon will send to fight. Oh, I saw it, it's Yuna. This battle will be very interesting because Yuna's talent rune is of the water attribute. Water counters fire. Long Xiao had just defeated Drizzt by relying on the advantage of attribute suppression. Now, she will have to face Yuna, whose attribute completely counters hers. I wonder what kind of brilliant performance Long Xiao will put up. Let's wait and see. At this moment, Yuna had already stepped onto the stage and stood in front of Long Xiao. She looked at the calm Long Xiao and felt a bit complicated and nervous. She didn't think that she could defeat Long Xiao, even if she had a huge advantage in terms of talent runes. You seem to be very nervous. Long Xiao calmly looked at Yuna and said, "If you have misgivings, it will be very hard for you to defeat me." Hearing Long Xiao's words, Yuna's expression couldn't help becoming subtle. She deeply looked at Long Xiao and said, "Even if there is an attribute suppression between us, it isn't shameful for me to lose to you. After all, you are the Long family's first wife's daughter, and I am only someone from a small family." In Yuna's opinion, those who were born in big clans were born with extraordinary talent and abundant cultivation resources. It was natural for them to be stronger than people from small clans like hers. Therefore, Yuna did not feel that losing to Long Xiao was a shameful thing. In short, it was not a loss to lose, and it was a win to make a profit. Yuna's words were broadcasted throughout the entire venue through the loudspeaker. Everyone who was watching the live broadcast through the crystal screen could hear Yuna's words. Some people agreed with Yuna's opinion, while others scoffed at it. They felt that Yuna had no fighting spirit and was just finding excuses for herself. What a joke. If the outcome of the competition is decided by the strength of the family, then what are we competing for? Why don't we just give the championship trophy to those large families? Long Xiao coldly smiled and said to Yuna, "Qin Xuan was born in the slums and didn't receive any systematic education since he was young. He didn't have any cultivation resources, but now he's standing at a height that even I have to look up to. How do you explain this?" At this point, Yuna had already reacted. She knew that her performance just now was unbearable and that she had misspoken. Facing Long Xiao's overbearing attitude, she could only brace herself. She straightened her neck and said, "Qin Xuan's performance in the past was also unremarkable. Wasn't it because he met his teacher that he rose to prominence?" Sophistry. Long Xiao was too lazy to continue arguing with Yuna. She directly looked at the referee and signaled for him to immediately announce the start of the competition. She was already unable to restrain herself from violently beating Yuna up. 6 Great Academies Ranking Tournament Finals. Star Dragon's First Academy versus Black Moon Combat Academy. Yuna versus Long Xiao. The competition will now begin. When the referee's whistle sounded, Long Xiao could not wait to charge towards Yuna. In the blink of an eye, she had closed in on Yuna. She raised her hand and swung her fist towards Yuna's face. However, where her fist came into contact with Yuna's face, she felt a wave of coldness and softness. Splash! Yuna's body suddenly turned into a pool of water that wrapped around Long Xiao's right hand. No matter how hard Long Xiao tried, she couldn't shake off the water on her hand. Don't struggle. This is the water imprisonment technique. Even if you burn with your black flames, you won't be able to break free in a short period of time. At this moment, Yuna's figure appeared behind Long Xiao. Her eyes were sharp as she looked at Long Xiao. She no longer had her previous apprehension and uneasiness. Her previous performance had clearly been a show of weakness to set a trap for Long Xiao, and as expected, Long Xiao had fallen for it. In the audience, when they saw this scene on the stage, they couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Who would have thought that Yuna had purposely shown weakness to provoke Long Xiao? They actually saw some of Chun Chongqing's shadow in Yuna. Without your right hand, your battle strength will be greatly restricted. I won't give you the chance to inscribe a glyph array. Yuna sneered. Her feet suddenly exerted force, and her body was like a sword as she rushed towards Long Xiao. She wanted to end this battle quickly and win this match for Star Dragon's First Academy. Chapter 329. Star Dragon City. In a luxurious manner, in a splendid living room, an old man in a black robe sat on the sofa with his hands folded in front of him. He was holding a black cane with a silver spirit stone inlaid on it, exuding an amazing fluctuation of spirit power. A middle-aged man in a suit stood in front of the old man with his head lowered. His pale face was covered in cold sweat, as if he had been greatly frightened. "Master, this subordinate has failed in his task. Please punish me." Facing the middle-aged man's request for punishment, the old man slowly raised his eyes and looked at him indifferently. He said lightly, "Speak." The middle-aged man immediately replied, "After receiving your order, I immediately went to the infirmary to take Baiyu away, but at the critical moment, Qinchuan's teacher, Ningya, appeared and stopped me. She also used her teacher to threaten me. I was worried that acting rashly would cause trouble for the family, so I stopped the action." Hearing the middle-aged man's answer, the old man closed his eyes and was silent for a moment before asking, "What else did Ningya say?" "She said that if you want to take someone from her, then you have to be prepared to fight her to the death. Her teacher is not dead yet." The middle-aged man told the old man Ningya's original words without missing a word. He didn't dare to leave out the slightest detail, nor did he dare to exaggerate in the slightest. "That old fart is still active." The old man's eyes were slightly subtle as he looked forward and muttered in a low voice, "Ningya is right. Her teacher is not dead yet, so we'd better not provoke her." Hearing the old man's words, the middle-aged man carefully asked, "Then what should we do now?" "Stop what you're doing for the time being. It's not worth provoking an old fart for a little guy." The old man glanced at the middle-aged man and said, "Okay, you can go." The middle-aged man was relieved and immediately asked the old man to leave. However, before he could turn around and take 2 steps, his eyes suddenly widened and a touch of horror appeared on his face. At the same time, his breathing stopped and he fell to the ground with a plop. The old man didn't even look at the middle-aged man lying on the ground. He slowly got up and walked towards the depths of the hall with his walking stick. In the quiet hall, only the sound of his footsteps and the sound of the walking stick hitting the ground echoed. After a while, the old man stood on a circular elevator. He activated the elevator and slowly descended to the ground. 3 minutes later, the lift stopped. The old man walked down the lift and stood in front of a silver-gray corridor. After verifying his fingerprints, face, and iris, he walked through the corridor calmly and stood in front of a huge bronze door. The old man forcefully pushed against the bronze door. With a rumbling sound, a crack that was wide enough for a person to pass through appeared in the bronze door, revealing the world behind it to the old man. Inside the bronze door, there was a huge metal machine. The machine was filled with all kinds of pipes and wires. In the middle of the machine, there was a room the size of a normal treatment cabin. In this room, filled with nutrient fluids, a young man was sleeping. His face was calm and peaceful. Looking at the young man in the cabin, the old man's face revealed a touch of awe. He walked to the front of the machine and pressed the black button on the machine. The machine emitted a low humming sound. The eyelashes of the young man sleeping in the cabin trembled slightly, as if he was about to wake up. The old man stood there quietly and waited. After over 10 minutes, the young man in the cabin finally opened his eyes slowly. It was a pair of indifferent and emotionless eyes. There was a hint of confusion and confusion in the depths. "Tingzu." The old man looked at the young man who had woken up and actually called him Tingzu. "So it's you." The young man, called Tingzu, looked at the old man with a complicated gaze. He said with a hoarse voice, "I remember that the last time you woke me up, you were only a young man in his early 30s. Yet, you've already aged to such an extent. The last time this junior woke Tingzu was 60 years ago. At that time, I had just succeeded the family head position, and it was also the first time I came into contact with you." The old man respectfully said to the young man, "Since that day, I've always remembered your teachings. I woke you up today because there's finally a clue to the matter you instructed me to do back then." Tingzu's eyes moved slightly and he asked, "What clue?" "I found someone who seems to be a blood elf. As the old man spoke, he opened the optical computer on his wrist and displayed the scene of Bayu's battle in the 6 great academies. The battle scene was very long and wasn't edited at all. Tingzu watched it very seriously. The ability to control blood is exclusive to the blood elves. Coupled with that silver-white hair, she's the same as the blood elves in my impression. However, her ears aren't as long and pointy as the elves, so she must have been disguised. Tingzu looked at Bayu with a strange gaze and seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he said to the old man, "You came to see me, but you didn't bring her with you. Did you encounter some trouble?" "Yes," the old man respectfully replied. "We've encountered a threat. The disciple of your friend in Azure Ancient City took away the blood elf and stopped our operation." Azure Ancient City? The old friend you're talking about is Ning Zhongtian, right? Ting Zu's face revealed a trace of reminiscence, and he sighed. Could it be that he hasn't entered a state of slumber? According to the people we planted in Azure Ancient City, he has always been awake and hasn't entered a state of slumber. It's really been too long since I've seen him. He's still as independent as before. Ting Zu glanced at the old man and said, "Since that's the case, let's bide our time for now. Ning Zhongtian. It's best not to provoke him if possible." Hearing Ting Zu's words, the old man felt relieved and nodded. "Yes, I understand. All right. If there's nothing else, I'm going to continue my slumber. After this, unless there's something especially important, don't wake me up for the next 10 years. Ting Zu looked deeply at the old man and said, "Remember, keep an eye on that blood elf." After giving the old man his instructions, Ting Zu slowly closed his eyes and entered a state of slumber once more. The old man bowed respectfully to Ancestor Ting, and then he slowly turned around and walked out. After the old man left, the world behind the bronze door became quiet again. Only the low buzzing of machines could be heard from time to time, announcing that some people were still alive. Chapter 330. Bayu's awakening was something worth celebrating for the Black Moon Combat Academy. While everyone went to visit Bayu, they couldn't help but look at Qin Xuan, who was sitting by the bed with a strange look in their eyes. During the day that Bayu was unconscious, Qin Xuan stayed by her side and didn't leave her side at all. Others couldn't help looking after her even if they wanted to. Seeing how worried Qin Xuan was about Bayu, everyone couldn't help but think of other things. No one would believe that the two of them were purely friends. Chen Chongqing and Blue Pool huddled together and looked at Bayu and Qin Xuan, who were drinking tea together. Chen Chongqing whispered, "Say, do you think Boss and Bayu are already together? They've never sat together before." Blue Pool raised his brows and said, "How would I know if you're asking me such a question? Make a guess." Chen Chongqing chuckled and said to Blue Pool, "I dare to bet that there's definitely something going on between Boss and Bayu." Blue Pool pondered for a moment and was about to say something when he suddenly coughed lightly and said to Chen Chongqing, "Let's go. We're going to train." Training isn't as interesting as watching Boss and Bayu being lovey-dovey. Chen Chongqing rolled his eyes and said, "Don't be such a killjoy. Brother, it'll be too late if you don't leave now." Blue Pool laughed bitterly and poked Chen Chongqing's waist. He said softly, "There's someone behind you." Chen Chongqing subconsciously turned his head to look behind him. When he saw LVZ standing behind him, the expression on his face suddenly became somewhat interesting. Blue Pool, I think you're right. We're about to compete in the finals against the first academy of Star Dragon Academy. We must make good use of our time to cultivate. Let's go cultivate." Chen Chongqing stood up and pretended as if nothing had happened. He greeted Lu Zi, then walked in the direction of their training. After they were far away from LVZ, Chen Chongqing's face instantly revealed a fearful expression, and he said to Blue Pool, "It's really fortunate that we didn't mention her. Otherwise, we'd probably be in trouble today." Hearing this, Blue Pool sighed and said to Chen Chongqing, "If Boss really gets together with Bayu, then the person who will be the saddest will definitely be Lu Zi." At the mention of Lu Zi, Chen Chongqing sighed helplessly and said, "In my opinion, Boss shouldn't be like this." Blue Pool cast a surprised glance at Qin Chongqing and asked, "Could it be that you actually think more highly of Boss and Luzi?" "No." Qin Chongqing grinned and said, "Boss, as an outstanding man, shouldn't you have 3 wives and 4 concubines? It's not enough to only be with Bai Yu." Blue Pool was speechless. Qin Ju, who had a lot on his mind, left the coffee shop and returned home. He didn't return to his room immediately. Instead, he went to the pavilion in the middle of the lake first. Whenever he was unhappy or something annoying happened, Qin Ju would always sit in the pavilion in the middle of the lake. This would make him feel much better. When Qin Ju arrived at the pavilion in the middle of the lake, he was surprised to see Qin Haoshuan's figure here. Seeing Qin Haoshuan, Qin Ju couldn't help but think of Qin Chuan. He thought of the life-and-death battle between Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan. He pursed his lips, walked forward, and said to Qin Haoshuan, "Haoshuan." Hearing Qin Ju's call, Qin Haoshuan slowly turned around and smiled at Qin Ju. "Aunt, you're back." "Haoshuan, Aunt has something to ask you." Qin Ju walked to Qin Haoshuan's side and sat down. He looked at Qin Haoshuan seriously and asked, "Is there really no way to resolve the grudge between you and Qin Chuan? Must we fight to the death in the arena?" Qin Haoshuan smiled and said to Qin Ju, "Aunt, I've told you before that you can't stop me, let alone Qin Chuan. Now that you're asking me this question, does it mean that you've already met Qin Chuan and met with a setback?" Qin Ju didn't know how to answer Qin Haoshuan's question because Qin Haoshuan was right. She had indeed met with a setback from Qin Chuan. Not only her, even Qin Chuan's teacher, Ningya, couldn't change Qin Chuan's mind. Seeing that Qin Ju was silent, Qin Haoshuan chuckled and asked, "Aunt, I want to know, are you trying so hard to stop me from having a life-and-death battle with Qin Chuan because you're worried about me, or because you're worried about Qin Chuan?" Qin Ju took a deep look at Qin Haoshuan and said, "What if I say that I don't want to see anything happen to either of you? I'm very curious. Aunt, what does Qin Chuan mean to you?" Qin Haoshuan was puzzled. "You're my aunt, and you've only met Qin Chuan by chance. Or do you have a similar relationship with Qin Chuan?" Qin Haoshuan looked at Qin Ju from head to toe and asked, "Aunt, have you ever had a lover before?" Qin Haoshuan asked this because he suspected that Qin Chuan was Qin Ju's illegitimate son. He looked at Qin Ju and said seriously, "If that's the case, then I can understand why Aunt's attitude towards Qin Chuan is so good. At the same time, I will take the initiative to resolve the grudge between Qin Chuan and Qin Chuan. I will even welcome Aunt to bring Qin Chuan back to our Qin family. I don't want to have another brother by my side." Of course, the premise of all of this is that Qin Chuan and Aunt are indeed related, and Qin Chuan has to be willing to resolve the grudge with me. "He's not my illegitimate son." Qin Ju shook his head and said, "He's the son of a very important friend of mine." "The son of a very important friend?" Qin Haoshuan was still puzzled. If he was the son of friend, why didn't he explain it clearly before? Why did he have to wait until things had developed to this point? Didn't he think it was too late? And I still mean that. As long as Qin Chuan is willing to take a step back, I'm willing to reconcile with him. As you can see, the problem doesn't lie with me, but with him. Qin Haoshuan sighed and said, "It's rare to meet an opponent who is qualified to be on par with me. I also hope to become friends with him." Qin Haoshuan's answer made Qin Ju feel very gratified. As long as Qin Haoshuan was willing to resolve the conflict between him and Qin Chuan, then she could fight for it and communicate with Qin Chuan again. Perhaps things weren't as complicated as she thought. After receiving a satisfactory answer, Qin Ju stood up and left the pavilion in the middle of the lake, preparing to go back and rest. Qin Haoshuan stood in the pavilion and watched Qin Ju leave. When Qin Ju's figure disappeared from his sight, the smile on his face immediately turned gloomy and cold. "I don't believe that Qin Chuan is just the son of a friend of yours. The more you value him, the more I want to destroy him." Chapter 331. The finals of the 6th Great Academy's ranking competition would be held on the 10th of June. On the 9th, Star Dragon City was unprecedentedly lively. Originally, Some spectators who were far away from Star Dragon City and did not want to watch the competition live came to Star Dragon City because of the opening of the World Stadium. They wanted to witness the birth of the champion of the 6 Great Academies ranking competition. On the other hand, the media also began to hype up the competition in advance, especially regarding the grudge between Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan. It made the finals that had yet to begin full of hype. On this day, after Qin Xuan finished his daily routine training, he did not do any additional training. Instead, he spent more time resting and adjusting his condition. At the same time, he once again saw Qin Ju, who had come looking for him. Qin Xuan poured a glass of water for Qin Ju and asked him with a smile, "General Qin, are you here to look for my teacher? She went out and might not be back for a while." "I'm not here to look for Ningya. I'm here to look for you." Qin Ju looked at Qin Xuan with a complicated expression and said, "I hope we can have a good talk." When Qin Xuan heard this, he looked at Qin Ju in surprise and asked, "General Qin, could it be that you're looking for me this time because of that matter from last time?" Qin Xuan felt that there was not much to talk about between him and Qin Ju. If he had to say that there was, it would probably be about the duel between him and Qin Haoshuan. Last time, Qin Ju came to him and hoped that he could give up on the life and death duel with Qin Haoshuan. However, he was rejected. Could it be that Qin Ju still hadn't given up? Yes. Qin Ju nodded and said to Qin Xuan, "I've already asked Haoshuan. He clearly told me that as long as you're willing to turn hostility into friendship, he's willing to become friends with you. There's no deep hatred between the two of you, right?" Qin Xuan smiled and sat down in front of Qin Ju. He asked, "General Qin, do you think you know Qin Haoshuan?" Qin Ju was stunned for a moment. He seemed to feel that Qin Xuan's question was a little strange. She thought for a moment and replied, "I'll watch Haoshuan grow up. I know him." "No, you don't understand Qin Haoshuan. In fact, you don't understand Qin Haoshuan as well as I do." Qin Xuan chuckled and said, "Qin Haoshuan is a person who will do anything to achieve his goals. He is definitely not an easy person to get along with. The Qin Haoshuan you see and know is just the Qin Haoshuan he wants you to see. Do you have any misunderstandings about Haoshuan?" Qin Xuan frowned. "Haoshuan is not the kind of person you say he is. General Qin, you've been in the army for a long time. Most of the people you interact with are straightforward soldiers. It's normal for you to be confused by Qin Haoshuan who likes to play dirty. But I'm different." Qin Xuan took a deep look at Qin Ju and said, "I was born in the slums. I've been struggling for survival since I was young. I know the mentality of people like you all too well. Qin Haoshuan is willing to reconcile with me? In my opinion, this is just a joke. Similarly, he also knows me very well. He knows that I won't agree to reconcile with him. That's why he relented and showed his grace in front of you. But it doesn't matter. I don't mind being a bad person. As for the matter of making peace, General Qin shouldn't mention it again. I can guarantee that the matter between me and Qin Haoshuan won't affect the friendship between you and my teacher." Qin Xuan's words made Qin Ju fall into deep thought. It also made her have to face a reality that she had always been unwilling to face. That was, Qin Haoshuan was no longer the cheerful and simple young man in her impression. Living in a big family like the Qin family, all the simple and kind people had died. Back then, wasn't the reason why she chose to join the army in a fit of anger because she couldn't stand the way those people in the family did things? Now, her most beloved nephew had also become such a hateful existence. Seeing that Qin Ju was a little dazed, the expression on Qin Xuan's face became somewhat complicated. He didn't know why, but he felt that Qin Ju was too tired to live. "General Qin, people change. It's impossible for the world to stay the same as you. You have to learn to understand and adapt." Qin Xuan stood up and said to Qin Ju, "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." "Wait a moment." Qin Ju stopped Qin Xuan, who was about to leave, and said, "I have one last question. Why do you have to fight to the death with Qin Haoshuan? Why aren't you willing to take a step back?" Qin Haoshuan aside, if Qin Xuan was willing to take a step back, then things wouldn't have developed to this point. Qin Xuan laughed bitterly when he heard this. With his back facing Qin Ju, he said, "I'm already standing on the edge of the cliff. If I take a step back, I'll be smashed into pieces. I can't retreat, and I have no reason to. If Qin Haoshuan was willing to hand over the dragon soul, he could take a step back. But would Qin Haoshuan be willing? Therefore, there would definitely be a battle between him and Qin Haoshuan. When Ningya returned, she saw Qin Zhu in the living room with a dazed expression. She had known Qin Zhu for so many years, but this was the first time she had seen such an expression on his face. It made one's heart ache and feel pity for him. What's wrong? Ningya sat down in front of Qin Zhu and said, You tried to persuade Qin Xuan, but were rejected again. Hearing this, Qin Zhu raised his eyes to look at Ningya. He pursed his lips and said, I realize that I don't understand Qin Xuan at all, nor do I understand Hao Xuan at all. I've really failed as an elder. Ningya looked at Qin Zhu helplessly and said, Everything can't be perfect. You've experienced so many things, you should have seen through it long ago. I'm going back. Qin Zhu slowly exhaled. She had decided to no longer participate in the matter between Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan and let everything develop naturally. Go back. Ningya looked at Qin Zhu and asked, Back to the 10th Army. Qin Zhu nodded and said, I can no longer adapt to the living environment of my family. I won't leave the 10th Army until I enter the nascent soul realm. You finally made up your mind to break through? It seems like what happened back then is no longer bothering you. In that case, this matter is actually a good thing for you. Ningya looked at Qin Zhu faintly and sighed. If I had your awareness, perhaps my name would have been engraved on the Star Dragon monument long ago. However, if that was the case, perhaps I wouldn't have the chance to become Qin Xuan's teacher. If I were to choose again, I would still choose to become Qin Xuan's teacher and accompany him through the most important journey in his life. Watching him grow up bit by bit is much more interesting than reaching the nascent soul realm. Chapter 332. On the 10th day of the 6th lunar month, the highly anticipated 6 Great Academies ranking tournament had finally arrived. On the morning of this day, the entire Star Dragon City became crowded earlier than usual. There was an endless stream of people and carriages. Those lucky enough to buy tickets to the finals walked into the World Stadium and sat down under the envious gazes of others. While waiting for the competition to begin, they were also engaged in heated discussions with the people around them about who would become the champions. On the other side, those who were unfortunate to not be able to buy tickets were gathered in front of the crystal screen closest to the World Stadium. They were attentively watching the news about the Black Moon Combat Academy and the First Academy of Star Dragon. Other than Qin Haoshuan and Yi Qingning, Qin Xuan and Baiyu were also highlighted. The representatives of both academies were a man and a woman. This caused many of the audience to have great expectations for their showdown. They wanted to see if the dark horse of the Black Moon Combat Academy would be able to stay dark until the end, or if the First Academy of Star Dragon will be able to maintain their undefeated legend. At 8 o'clock, there was still an hour before the start of the finals. The Black Moon Combat Academy students finally walked out of the office and prepared to head to the World Stadium. At this time, the media reporters who had been waiting outside the office for a long time rushed towards the Black Moon Combat Academy students. Student Qin Xuan, what are your chances of winning the finals? Which match are you preparing to go on stage? Student Qin Xuan, are you going to fulfill your promise and sign a life and death contract with Qin Haoshuan? Student Baiyu, how is your condition? Is it enough to support you in the next match? Faced with the media reporters' questions, the Black Moon Combat Academy students kept their mouths shut and did not say a word. Even the most lively Chun Chongxing had a dignified expression and did not say a word. The students pushed aside the people surrounding them and reluctantly boarded the shuttle that the tournament organizers had specially prepared for them. After boarding the shuttle, everyone found that there was already a person waiting for them on the shuttle. You guys seem surprised to see me. Zhou Lin smiled at the crowd and acted very naturally. Senior, why are you here? Qin Xuan walked to Zhou Lin's side and asked, Are you here to cheer for us? Yeah, I haven't had a chance to see you these past few days, so I can only use this method to meet you. Zhou Lin looked at Qin Xuan with clear eyes and said, The finals are about to begin. I want to say good luck to you. Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Xuan said to Zhou Lin with some guilt, I'm sorry, senior sister. I've been busy these past few days, so I didn't have time to meet you. It doesn't matter. Your matter is more important. Zhou Lin was very considerate. As someone who has fought with Qin Haoshuan before, I want to remind you that before Qin Haoshuan uses his dragon soul power, if you can win, you must win. Don't give him a chance to use his dragon soul power. Hearing Zhou Lin's reminder, the crowd's expression changed slightly. In the match between Qin Haoshuan and Zhou Lin, Qin Haoshuan had exposed almost half of his strength. In their opinion, Qin Haoshuan's strength should be comparable to Su Kuang's. Qin Haoshuan's strength lay in his dragon's soul power. If he didn't have it, Qin Haoshuan wouldn't be a threat. Senior sister, I will do my best. Qin Xuan nodded solemnly. Even if he activates his dragon soul power, I will still win. World Stadium, contestant preparation area. The representatives of the First Academy of Star Dragon had already arrived. This time, the contestant was still the contestant from the semifinals. However, compared to the semifinals, Qin Duo Bao was much more obedient. Obviously, Qin Duo Bao had been taught a lot these past few days. Yi Qingming sat in front of the window and looked at the noisy audience. Her eyes flashed with a touch of reminiscence. She said, I remember the last time I saw such a scene was during the National Day ceremony. At that time, I was only 10 years old. Now 9 years have passed. That's right. I was sitting in the audience seats at that time. When I looked around, there were people everywhere. I was also a little emotional. I never thought that one day I would be one of the protagonists of this World Stadium. Drizzt shared the same sentiments as Yuna. Both of them were born in middle-class, aristocratic families. Apart from the support of their families, their own hard work was indispensable as well. Now that they had obtained a chance to showcase themselves in front of hundreds of thousands of spectators, they couldn't afford to lose no matter what. Not only did he want to win, but he also wanted to win cleanly. What a boring idea. Qin Duo Bao lay on the table and looked at the crowd in boredom. She said, If you like this place so much, why don't you buy it? It won't cost much anyway. Hearing Qin Duo Bao's words, Yuna and Drizzt didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the eyes of Qin Duo Bao, everything could be measured with money. On the other side, Qin Haoshuan sat on the sofa with his eyes closed. He didn't participate in the discussion. He wanted to be in peak condition at all times. Kacha, the door with a silvery white metallic luster, slowly opened to both sides, and a group of 5 figures dressed in black slowly walked in. Almost immediately, everyone's gazes collided. Qin Xuan looked at Qin Haoshuan, who was sitting on the sofa and looking at him. He suddenly grinned and slowly walked toward Qin Haoshuan. Long time no see. Qin Xuan stood in front of Qin Haoshuan and said, I met General Qin yesterday. She doesn't seem to know you well. Qin Haoshuan looked at Qin Xuan indifferently and said, What did you say to her? I didn't say anything. I just saw through your disguise. Why? Is General Qin so disappointed in you that he ran away from home? Qin Xuan looked at Qin Haoshuan with a smile and said, If that's really the case, then that's great. Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Qin Haoshuan's face instantly became gloomy. Qin Xuan was right. After seeing Qin Xuan yesterday, Qin Zhu didn't return to the Qin family. Instead, he directly returned to the 10th Army and didn't leave any words for him. Originally, he was surprised. However, after hearing Qin Xuan's words, he finally understood that the instigator of all this was Qin Xuan. Let's go. Qin Haoshuan slowly stood up. He looked at Qin Xuan with a malicious and sharp gaze and said, Let's go find the referee and apply for a life and death agreement. Qin Xuan smiled when he heard this. That's what I was looking forward to. Chapter 333. Due to the sudden appearance of Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan, the noisy World Stadium became much quieter. Everyone looked at the crystal screen in unison. Their faces were filled with question marks as they looked at the 2 figures who had suddenly appeared in the center of the stadium. There was still about 20 minutes before the official start of the match. The introduction before the match had yet to begin. Why did these two people come out? What were they doing? Could it be that they wanted to have a private match in advance? Under the curious and puzzled gazes of the audience, Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan slowly walked up to the arena and stood in the center of the arena. Referee, we would like to apply for a life and death agreement. When Qin Haoshuan's words were transmitted through the loudspeaker throughout the entire stadium, all of the audience went into an uproar. They had thought of many possibilities, but they had never thought that Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan would come up to the arena to sign a life and death agreement. Once the life and death agreement was signed, Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan would have a life and death battle in the arena. Perhaps only one person would be able to leave the arena today. While the audience was discussing, the referee walked up to the arena. He looked at Qin Haoshuan with a solemn expression before looking at Qin Xuan. He said in a deep voice, "Both of you are one of the most outstanding geniuses in the Federation. Your futures are limitless. Are you sure you want to sign a life and death agreement here?" "I'm sure," Qin Haoshuan replied without any hesitation. He couldn't wait to tear Qin Xuan into pieces. Qin Xuan smiled at the referee and said, "I'm sure." After he obtained an affirmative answer, the referee didn't hesitate any longer. He directly took out a crystal screen and said to Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan, "This is the life and death agreement. Once you sign it, you'll be allowed to kill your opponent. If the other party admits defeat and surrenders, then the victor must stop." After hearing the referee's words, Qin Haoshuan didn't say anything else. He reached out his hand and wrote his name on the crystal screen. At the same time, he pressed his fingerprint. After doing all this, he handed the crystal screen to Qin Xuan. He looked at Qin Xuan indifferently and said in a cold voice, "I hope you won't surrender because you're afraid of death. I'll return the same words to you." Qin Xuan smiled and took over the crystal screen. He signed his name and pressed his fingerprint. Then, the life and death agreement was signed successfully. When the audience saw that Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan had successfully signed the life and death agreement through the crystal screen, complicated expressions appeared on their faces. They hoped to see an exciting fight, but they also felt pity for the geniuses who might die. Qin Haoshuan looked around and saw the changes in the audience's expressions. He looked at Qin Xuan and asked, "Who do you think the audience is feeling pity for?" "It should be me." Qin Xuan grinned and gave an answer that surprised Qin Haoshuan. Qin Haoshuan sneered and said, "You know yourself well." Qin Xuan sighed and said, "Yes, I do know myself well. After all, I'm just a commoner, and you're the son of an aristocratic family. If I kill you, your Qin family won't let me go. Therefore, I will die in your hands. Tell me, how can the audience not feel pity for me?" Qin Haoshuan's face turned gloomy in an instant when he heard Qin Xuan's words. He looked deeply at Qin Xuan and snorted coldly. He turned around and walked down the arena. He realized that he got angry easily when he was with Qin Xuan. This wasn't good. Qin Xuan shrugged his shoulders when he saw Qin Haoshuan leave in a huff. He revealed an innocent expression and walked down the arena. The audience who heard the conversation between Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan had interesting expressions on their faces. If Qin Xuan really defeated Qin Haoshuan and killed him in the next match, the Qin family wouldn't let him go. In that case, regardless of whether Qin Xuan won or not, wouldn't he be dead meat? In the study room of the Qin family, Qin Yiming sat in front of the table and watched the live broadcast through the crystal screen. He couldn't help but snort coldly after he heard Qin Xuan's words. What a sharp tongue. Qin Xuan said those words in front of the audience because he wanted to use the power of public opinion to put pressure on the Qin family. Qin Yiming felt more and more disgusted as he looked at Qin Xuan's figure on the crystal screen. He only felt this way when he lost to that person. In the sky, 3,000 kilometers away from Star Dragon City, a huge fleet was slowly moving forward. On the huge main ship in the center, Qin Ju, who was wearing a dark green military uniform, stood on the deck and looked in the direction of Star Dragon City. Even though they were thousands of kilometers apart, she could still hear the bustling voices of the people in Star Dragon City. "General," Yunao walked behind Qin Ju and whispered, "The finals have already begun. Qin Xuan and young Master Hao Xuan have already signed a life and death agreement. Hearing Yuna's words, Qin Zhu slowly closed his eyes and sighed. Your sister Yuman is also on the team this time. Do you want her to win? Yuna was stunned for a moment before she honestly replied, I naturally want my sister to win. Let's go all out. Qin Zhu ordered, let's go to the Eastern Mountain battlefront. Friends of the audience, friends in front of the crystal screen, good morning. This is the World Stadium, the location of the finals of the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. Today, the First Academy of Star Dragon and the Black Moon Combat Academy will have an exciting battle here to fight for the championship trophy. Let's wait and see who will be the champion. Now, let's invite the representatives from both sides to the stage. As soon as the host finished speaking, the students from the First Academy of Star Dragon and the Black Moon Combat Academy slowly walked out of the preparation area and headed towards the stage. When the contestants from both sides appeared, the crowd immediately erupted into an incomparably enthusiastic cheer. Luzi walked beside Qin Xuan and looked at the audience who were cheering for them. She whispered to Qin Xuan, Are you still not going to let me go on stage today? In the previous semifinals, Qin Xuan did not let her go on stage. Now that she had reached the finals, if she still could not go on stage, it would be a regret in her heart. You'll be the first to go on stage. Qin Xuan smiled and said to Lu Zi, It doesn't matter if you win or lose, just show your elegance. Lu Zi finally revealed a satisfied smile when she heard this. She smiled at Qin Xuan and said, I won't let you down. On the other side, Yi Qingning saw Qin Xuan and Lu Zi chatting and laughing. She couldn't help but frown, and a hint of disgust appeared in her clear eyes. P.S. Yuna and Yuman's names were mixed up. Sorry. Chapter 334. Let us welcome the 5 contestants from the First Academy of Star Dragon Academy to the stage. First Academy of Star Dragon Academy, Captain Qin Hao Xuan. When the enthusiastic host introduced Qin Hao Xuan, the entire venue was filled with cheers from the fangirls. Qin Hao Xuan was young, handsome, talented, and single. He was definitely the dream partner of every girl. Although the possibility of marrying Qin Hao Xuan was very small, it didn't stop them from enthusiastically cheering for him. Goddess of Star Dragon, Yi Qingning. After the cheers from the fangirls stopped, the cheers from the younger fangirls sounded. Compared to Qin Hao Xuan's female fans, Yi Qingning's male fans were definitely not to be outdone. The richest girl in the world, Qianduo Bao. Compared to when she introduced Qin Hao Xuan and Yi Qingning, the host's expression was slightly more awkward. This was because the slogan to introduce Qianduo Bao wasn't something that she had thought up, but rather something that Qianduo Bao had requested. Although everyone knew that he was very rich, it wasn't a bit inappropriate to shout out so openly. Because of the host's introduction of Qianduo Bao, the originally lively scene became silent almost instantly. The few elders of the Qian family who were present also had black lines on their faces. They felt that the education they had given Qianduo Bao a few days ago was in vain. Once this guy was released, he revealed his true colors. Late Foundation Establishment, Yuman. Complete Foundation Establishment, Drizzt. Fortunately, there weren't many cheers when the host introduced Yuman and Drizzt, so Qianduo Bao wasn't too embarrassed. After introducing the First Academy of Star Dragon Academy, let us now welcome the Black Moon Combat Academy. Black Moon Combat Academy, Captain Qin Xuan. When the host introduced Qin Xuan, there were cheers from the crowd, but they were much louder than Qin Hao Xuan and Yi Qingning. However, Qin Xuan didn't mind. The louder the cheers, the more embarrassing it would be if he lost the match. Mysterious girl by you. Roar. Just when Qin Xuan thought that the scattered cheers would continue until the end of the introduction, the audience suddenly cheered enthusiastically and cheered for Bai Yu. Looking at the excited audience, Qin Xuan's face couldn't help but darken. He asked Chen Chongqing, What's wrong with these people? You didn't have any reaction when you introduced me just now, but you're so enthusiastic when you're introducing Bai Yu. Boss, no matter what, Bai Yu is still a beauty. Chen Chongxing smiled and said to Qin Xuan, "Isn't this normal? Then what about Qin Haoshuan?" Qin Xuan looked displeased. "He's not a beauty." Chen Chongxing answered seriously, "But he's handsome." Qin Xuan, F** King Chen Chongxing. After the contestant introductions, it was time for the real competition. The rules of the competition remained the same. It was still a one-on-one battle. The Black Moon Combat Academy's first contestant was Lu Zi, while the First Academy's first contestant was Qian Duobao. When the audience saw that the First Academy had sent Qian Duobao as the first contestant, they couldn't help but think of his performance in the semifinals. Their expressions became rather strange. They clearly remembered that Qian Duobao had failed to bribe his opponent with money during the semifinals. Then, he had used his family background to threaten his opponent and successfully won the competition. Now, that Qian Duobao was the first contestant to fight. Was he going to use the same trick again? 6 Great Academies ranking tournament finals. Star Dragon's First Academy against the Black Moon Combat Academy. Qian Duobao against Lu Zi. Let the competition begin. After the host announced the star of the competition, the referee's whistle rang out. Lu Zi and Qian Duobao, who were standing opposite each other on the stage, moved at almost the same time. Lu Zi quickly retreated and used a talisman pen to inscribe a glyph array. On the other side, Qian Duobao quickly rushed towards Lu Zi. "Take my move. You can never have enough money," Qian Duobao shouted. She waved her right hand, and a sky full of shiny coins flew towards Lu Zi. Seeing this scene, the audience's eyes widened. What kind of operation was this? Qian Duobao's attack looks like she's using money to smash people, but in reality, these coins are formed from her spiritual energy and aren't real coins. Perhaps today, we'll be able to see the strength of the Qian family's young miss. Lu Zi is still walking the conventional path of drawing distance and inscribing glyph arrays. It's nothing special. On the other hand, Qian Duobao might bring us a different surprise. After hearing the commentator's words, the audience realized that the large pile of coins that Qian Duobao had casually thrown out were not real, but were formed from spiritual energy. However, these coins didn't seem to have any special characteristics. Could they really pose a threat to Lu Zi? Just as the audience had this thought, the coins that Qian Duobao had thrown out had already flown in front of Lu Zi. Seeing this, Lu Zi didn't panic. Her feet were like the wind, and she quickly dodged the attack of these coins. Seeing this scene, Qian Duobao sneered. She waved her hands, and the coins that were flying in the sky suddenly gathered together and turned into a huge gold ingot. It made a sharp turn in the air and smashed towards Lu Zi's head. Boom! The gold ingot smashed into the arena and exploded with an ear-piercing roar. It also shocked the audience. Who would have thought that Qian Duobao would have such a move? It seems that we have underestimated Qian Duobao in the past. Just this move of recondensing the separated spiritual energy is not something that ordinary people can do. From Qian Duobao's current performance, she should be more adept at frontal attacks. As an illusion array master, Lu Zi is most afraid of this kind of opponent. I don't know how Lu Zi will deal with it next. Although the gold ingot had already smashed into the arena, no one thought that this attack could hit Qian Duobao. At this time, other than the gold ingot that had landed on the ground, there was only Qian Duobao in the arena. Lu Zi's figure had already disappeared. Qian Duobao frowned as she observed her surroundings, but did not see any traces of LVZ. She pondered for a moment, then waved her hand, causing the gold ingot to split into countless coins again, surrounding her as a form of defense. Seeing Qian Duobao's response, many audience members nodded and praised. Compared to the semifinals, Qian Duobao's performance was much more normal. This was how the first daughter of the Qian family should be. Hey, don't pretend to be mysterious, okay? The arena is only so big. Where can you hide? If you don't come out, I'll dig 3 feet into the ground. Qian Duobao didn't have the patience to continue wasting time with Lu Zi. She shouted, and the spiritual energy in her body surged. The coins that surrounded her suddenly spun and shot out in all directions like darts. Chapter 335. Qian Duo Bao shouted, and a huge amount of spiritual power surged out. In just a breath, there were already thousands of coins on the arena, densely covering the entire arena. It had to be known that the arena in the World Stadium was more than twice the size of the Red Dragon Sports Stadium. It was not an easy task to use coins made of spiritual power to pave the entire arena. However, not only did Qian Duo Bao do it, he even appeared to be very relaxed. Looking at the coins all over the arena, Qian Duo Bao sneered and said, "It seems that you are determined not to show up. In that case, I won't be polite." Boundless Qian Duo. Following Qian Duo Bao's shout, those spinning coins began to fly up and down irregularly, almost filling up every gap in the arena. Unless LVZ could fly to the sky and not fall down, otherwise, under such a search without any blind spots, she would definitely be found. When tens of thousands of coins started to move together, the scene was extremely shocking. At this moment, the audience could only see the coins flying in the sky and nothing else. Our vision has been blocked by the coins flying in the sky, and we can no longer see the specific situation on the arena. However, I can conclude that the person who has the advantage now is definitely Qian Duo Bao. It's really unbelievable. Qian Duo Bao's spiritual power seems to be endless. It can actually support her to create so many coins. With my early gold core stage, if I want to create so many coins, it is very difficult or even impossible. This is not because my spiritual power is not enough, but because I can't use all my spiritual power on this kind of thing. However, we clearly saw that Qian Duo Bao was extremely relaxed and skillful. Obviously, this is not her limit. In the past, I never understood what was so outstanding about Qian Duo Bao. Other than being rich, she seemed to be useless. However, now I have to say that Qian Duo Bao is definitely the person with the most abundant spiritual power reserve I have ever seen. No one in the Foundation establishment stage can compare to her. The commentators' words were unanimously agreed by the audience. They had watched so many matches, but they had never seen someone with such abundant spiritual power like Qian Duo Bao. Not to mention the commentator and the audience, even the people from the First Academy of Star Dragon, who had been with Qian Duo Bao all the time, were stunned. Qian Duo Bao's spiritual energy was so abundant that even Qin Haoshuan felt inferior. How can Qian Duo Bao have such abundant spiritual energy? Yuman's eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the coins flying around the arena. He cried out involuntarily, "I'm afraid the Golden Core Stage is nothing more than this." Even Golden Core Stage cultivators may not be able to use their spiritual energy so freely. Driz sighed and said, "As expected, Qian Duo Bao's repeated mistakes are not without reason." In the past, Driz felt that Qian Duo Bao was able to act unscrupulously and was pampered by the Qian family because of her identity as the young miss of the Qian family. But now, it seemed that he was wrong. Qian Duo Bao also had some outstanding points. If not, the Qian family might not value her because of her identity. If I'm not wrong, Qian Duo Bao should have the immeasurable body. Yi Qingming looked at Qian Duo Bao with a subtle expression. If Qian Duo Bao hadn't taken the initiative to reveal something, she wouldn't have been able to tell that Qian Duo Bao was hiding such a shocking secret. The immeasurable body means that his spiritual energy is immeasurable. Only someone with the immeasurable body can have such abundant spiritual energy at the Foundation establishment stage. Qin Haoshuan and Yi Qingming had the same thought. He also felt that Qian Duo Bao should have the immeasurable body. This kind of physique was extremely rare, and once it matured, its combat strength would be extremely shocking. On the other side, the people from the Black Moon Combat Academy also saw the peculiarities of Qian Duo Bao's body and began to worry about Lu Zi's situation. Qian Duo Bao might have the legendary immeasurable body. He has abundant spiritual energy and is not afraid of consumption. If Lu Zi encounters this kind of person, it will be too difficult for her to win. Chen Changxing frowned and said to Qin Chuan, "If other people encountered this situation, they would probably choose to passively defend and wait for Lu Zi to make the first move and reveal an opening. However, Qian Duobao is unscrupulous and can completely cover Lu Zi without any scruples. If they were fighting in the wild, it would be fine, but in a restricted area like the arena, it will be too difficult for Lu Zi to display her strength. At the end of the day, LVZ was an illusion array master. What she was good at wasn't arena battles, which had a lot of restrictions. If they met in the wild, even if LVZ wasn't Qian Duobao's match, it would be extremely difficult for Qian Duobao to defeat LVZ. Qin Chuan was clear about what Qin Changxing said, but it was too late to say anything now. Before Qian Duobao went all out, who would have thought that Qian Duobao would have such a rare, immeasurable body? Something's wrong. Bai Yu's eyes suddenly focused and said to Qin Chuan, "The battle is over." As soon as Bai Yu finished speaking, the coins that were fluttering madly in the air suddenly converged at a corner of the arena, and they transformed into an enormous gold ingot that blotted out the sky. Under the enormous pressure formed by the gold ingot, LVZ's figure actually slowly appeared beneath the gold ingot. Admit defeat. Qian Duobao looked calmly at Lu Zi and said, "If you were a battle formation master, perhaps I would be somewhat afraid of you, but you're just an illusion array master. This stage isn't suitable for you, and it doesn't belong to you." Hearing Qian Duobao's words, the pale-faced Lu Zi couldn't help but tremble, and a touch of sadness appeared in her eyes. Just now, in the face of the sky-covering search of coins, she had tried her best to dodge, but she was still discovered and had nowhere to hide. This made her feel a deep sense of powerlessness. She had clearly tried her best, but why couldn't she win the battle? She was unwilling to accept this. She was truly unwilling. Lu Zi. Below the arena, Qin Chuan gazed at the stubborn expression on Lu Zi's face, and then he sighed lightly and said, "Come back." When she heard Qin Chuan, Lu Zi raised her eyes to look at Qin Chuan, and her eyes dimmed down. "I want to try again." She really wanted to try again. Even if she lost, she wanted to fight back. She couldn't give up just like that. At the moment this thought appeared in her mind, Lu Zi gritted her teeth and waved the talisman brush, inscribing the last stroke of the talisman formation, and then she shouted furiously, 3,000 worlds. When he saw Lu Zi's actions, Qian Duobao frowned slightly and said, "You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin." Rumble. A huge gold ingot fell with a loud bang and smashed directly onto Lu Zi's body, knocking Lu Zi out of the arena and on the ground. Looking at Lu Zi lying on the ground coughing up blood, Qian Duobao shook his head gently. He was about to say something when he suddenly froze on the spot. Chapter 336. When Qian Duobao stood there in a daze, the huge gold ingot that covered the sky also dissipated at this time, turning into spiritual energy that filled the sky and dissipated. Seeing this scene, whether it was the audience or the referee, they were a little stunned. What was going on? We can see that Lu Zi has already left the boundary and should be judged as a loss. However, Qian Duobao's current situation seems to be a bit special. It seems that she has been affected by the illusion array. Lu Zi shouted a name before called 3,000 worlds. It should be the name of a talisman array, but I have never heard of this talisman array. I don't know its specific effects. Looking at Qian Duobao's situation now, it doesn't seem too good. Just as the commentators were curious about Qian Duobao's condition, the referee had already gone up the stage to check on Qian Duobao. After checking, the referee found that Qian Duobao's body did not suffer any injuries, but her mind was a bit blurry. She seemed to have fallen into a very strange predicament and was unable to extricate herself. After noticing the situation that Qian Duobao was facing, the referee did not know what to do. Although Lu Zi had already fallen outside the stage, with Qian Duobao's current situation, even if he announced that Qian Duobao had won, Qian Duobao would not be able to continue the next match unless Lu Zi was willing to remove the illusion array for Qian Duobao. However, was this possible? Below the stage, Lu Zi saw the frowning referee looking at her. She could not help but grin and say, "She has fallen into my illusion array, 3,000 worlds. Unless her spiritual power is stronger than mine, she will need to experience 3,000 illusory worlds before she can walk out." As Lu Zi's voice fell, there was a burst of exclamations. No one expected Lu Zi's illusion array to be so terrifying. She needed to experience 3,000 illusory worlds before she could walk out. If her willpower was not strong enough, and her spiritual power was not strong enough, perhaps she would be completely lost after experiencing a dozen illusory worlds. She would forget the difference between reality and the environment and would forever become a retard. After realizing this, the elder of the Qian family immediately sent a message to Qin Haoshuan. He asked Qin Haoshuan to replace Qian Duo Bao with Qian Duo Bao in exchange for letting Lu Zi remove the illusory array for Qian Duo Bao. If he delayed any longer, he was really worried that Qian Duo Bao would be in trouble. After receiving the signal from the Qian family's elder, Qin Haoshuan took a step forward and said to the referee, "Referee, we request to replace Qian Duo Bao. At the same time, we hope that Lu Zi can help Qian Duo Bao remove the illusory formation." Although Qin Haoshuan didn't think that this illusion array would have such a terrifying effect, there was nothing wrong with being careful. If something really happened to Qian Duo Bao, it would be troublesome. Qin Haoshuan didn't know what to say when he saw Qian Duo Bao standing in the arena in a daze. When he found out that Qian Duo Bao had the immeasurable body, he thought that Qian Duo Bao would be able to show off his prowess and defeat a few more opponents. Who would have thought that Lu Zi would give Qian Duo Bao such a fatal blow at the most crucial moment? When the referee heard Qin Haoshuan's words, he immediately looked at Lu Zi again. When she saw the referee looking at her again, Lu Zi smiled and said, "Okay." As she spoke, Lu Zi stood up. She held a talisman pin and drew a stroke towards Qian Duo Bao from afar. When she put the pin down, Qian Duo Bao suddenly trembled and woke up from his daze. Qian Duo Bao looked around in a daze. He seemed to recall something. The expression on his face gradually became gloomy. He looked at the referee standing in front of him and asked, "I lost?" The referee shook his head. Before Qian Duo Bao could breathe a sigh of relief, he said, "You didn't lose, but you have been replaced. You have lost the qualification to continue to the next match." When Qian Duo Bao heard the referee's words, he couldn't help but angrily look at Lu Zi below the arena. He said loudly, "Hey, you are too much. You can't beat me, so you use underhanded tactics." Qian Duo Bao was really angry. She originally wanted to show off her power today and change her image in Qin Haoshuan's mind. Now it was all ruined. In the face of Qian Duo Bao's anger, Lu Zi smiled and said, "I have already lost, but I'm also not qualified to continue to the next match." Qian Duo Bao was ashamed and angry. "I was merciful to you just now. You have to compensate me. Then how much do you want?" Lu Zi glanced at Qian Duo Bao and said, "I will give you as much money as you want." Qian Duo Bao was furious when he heard this. He said angrily to Lu Zi, "Who are you looking down on? Do you think I will ask you for money? How much can you give me? I will give you double." When the audience heard the quarrel between Qian Duo Bao and Lu Zi, they couldn't help but laugh. People like Qian Duo Bao, who treated money like dirt, were rare in the world today. Cough, cough. The two of you can quarrel outside the arena. The match still needs to continue. The referee looked at Qian Duo Bao with a headache. He couldn't afford to offend this young lady. It was better to ask her to leave first. "Just you wait." Qian Duo Bao walked down the stage angrily and came to Lu Zi's side. It was obvious that he wanted to quarrel with Lu Zi. However, Lu Zi only smiled and leisurely laid down on the stretcher. She was actually carried away by the medical staff, leaving Qian Duo Bao stomping his feet in anger. Next, the First Academy of Star Dragon and the Black Moon Combat Academy will each send a representative to continue the match. Hearing the referee's words, Qin Haoshuan looked around and said to Drizzt, "You will fight this match. You must win." Drizzt was the strongest person besides Qin Haoshuan, and Yi Qingning from the First Academy of Star Dragon. If he fought in the second match, as long as he didn't meet Qin Xuan or Bai Yu, his chances of winning were very high. It could be said that it was a very safe decision. Drizzt nodded at Qin Haoshuan and said, "I will do my best." Now that it was the finals, no one who could reach this stage was weak. Even if he was at the great circle of Foundation establishment, he still wouldn't be able to guarantee victory. Boasting that he would definitely win would only bring more pressure to himself. It was better to say that he would do his best. On the other side, the Black Moon Combat Academy had sent out Long Xiao. Qin Chuan looked at Long Xiao, who was preparing to go up the stage, and said with a smile, "Long Xiao, it doesn't matter if you win or lose this match, as long as you're happy." Long Xiao rolled her eyes at Qin Chuan and said, "I know that you and Bai Yu are very strong and have the confidence to defeat everyone on the other side. However, if you talk to me like this, it will make me very unhappy. It's fine if I lose this match, but if I win, just wait and see." Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Long Xiao, who had turned her head away. He only wanted Long Xiao to relax and not be too nervous. He didn't have any other intentions. Chapter 337. 6 Great Academies Ranking Tournament Finals. Star Dragon's First Academy versus Black Moon Combat Academy. Drizzt versus Long Xiao. Let the match begin. On the stage, Long Xiao and Drizzt stood facing each other. After the referee's whistle sounded, neither of them made the first move. Long Xiao had left a deep impression on Drizzt in the previous matches. She wasn't someone who mainly relied on array glyphs to fight. To be safe, it was better to first probe the opponent's strength. Compared to Drizzt, Long Xiao didn't think as much. She calmly looked at Drizzt and said, "Before I went up on stage, someone didn't believe that I could defeat you and told me to just do my best. This made me very unhappy." Hearing Long Xiao's words, Drizzt couldn't help but be stunned. What did she mean by saying such words at this time? Below the stage, the expression on Qin Chuan's face could be said to be quite interesting. He really did not expect Long Xiao to be such a vengeful person. He had just casually mentioned it just now, but it was actually brought up to the stage to talk about it. "Today, I don't plan on using array glyphs. I want to fight you head on." Long Xiao deeply looked at Drizzt and said, "I want to prove to someone that even if I, Long Xiao, don't use array glyphs, I'm still a powerhouse." Drizzt was completely stupefied. There was actually such a thing? Below the stage, Chen Chongqing held back his laughter. He playfully looked at Qin Chuan and said, "Boss, as someone who has experience in this field, let me remind you, Long Xiao has already marked you down in her little notebook. You'll suffer in the future." Qin Chuan glanced at Chen Chongqing helplessly, and then he looked at Bai Yu and asked, "Did I say something wrong earlier?" "Yes." Bai Yu nodded and said, "It's just like when you say that a girl isn't beautiful, she'll definitely be angry." To Long Xiao, strength is clearly more important than appearance. Qin Chuan was dumbstruck. Was this still the Bai Yu he knew? She actually said such a crooked argument. "It's the same as you, boss, telling Lu Zi to give up and not continue the competition." Chen Chongqing smiled at Qin Chuan and said, "You lack trust in everyone." Qin Chuan smiled bitterly. He didn't know what to say. His starting point was really for everyone's sake. He didn't want everyone to work too hard. There was no other meaning. However, it seemed that everyone had misinterpreted his meaning. At this moment, Drizzt looked at the eager Long Xiao and was somewhat unable to restrain himself. Regardless of whether Long Xiao's words were true or false, he still had to test Long Xiao first. Whoosh! Drizzt's figure was like the wind. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Long Xiao. As his spiritual energy surged, a huge wind blade swept across the sky and slashed towards Long Xiao. Facing Drizzt's frontal assault, Long Xiao neither retreated nor dodged. Black flames suddenly ignited on his arms, blocking the path of the wind blades. When the wind blades collided with the flames, the wind blades were silently devoured by the flames and broke apart. At the instant the wind blades broke apart, Drizzt's figure flashed and appeared behind Long Xiao like a ghost. His hands crossed, he sent a palm strike towards Long Zhao's back. Whoosh! The wind howled as a powerful pressure surged towards Long Zhao. Still, Long Zhao didn't dodge. Instead, he turned around and punched out. Black flames transformed into a long dragon, roaring as it devoured the incoming wind. Seeing this, Drizzt had no choice but to temporarily increase the distance between him and Long Zhao. However, Long Zhao didn't let him off and continued to pursue. Just a moment ago, Drizzt and Long Zhao engaged in a probing exchange. It could be seen that Long Zhao's black flames completely suppressed Drizzt's gales. Regardless of Drizzt's wind blades or wind pressure, they were all devoured by Long Zhao's black flames. The Long family's black flames can incinerate anything in their path. Although Drizzt's cultivation realm is higher than Long Zhao's, quantity can't make up for the disparity in quality. If Drizzt can't resolve the problem of being suppressed by the black flames, then he'll be too passive and could lose at any time. Not to mention the commentator. Even the audience with limited standards could see that Drizzt was being suppressed by Long Zhao in an extremely miserable manner. No matter what moves he used counterattack, they were all devoured by the black flames. He was completely unable to harm Long Zhao in the slightest. On the other hand, Drizzt's spiritual energy was being consumed while dodging the attacks of the black flames. It was truly unbearable. At this moment, Drizzt's heart was extremely bitter. He, a Grand Foundation Establishment Realm expert, was actually being suppressed by Long Zhao, an initial Foundation Establishment Realm expert. There was practically no chance for him to turn the situation around. This made him feel incomparably sullen. He wanted to counterattack, but he didn't have a good opportunity. This also made him realize that sometimes having a high cultivation realm didn't represent strength. Although the disciples of large clans all had low cultivation realms, their actual combat strength was far from what people from small clans like him could compare to. At this moment, Stardragon's first academy side saw that Drizzt was being completely suppressed by Long Zhao. Although they were somewhat disappointed, they could understand. After all, Long Zhao was the Long family's first wife's daughter, and the Long family was publicly recognized as the fifth largest family outside of the four great families. In some aspects, the Long family even surpassed the four great families. The first wife's daughter of such a large family, even the future successor, wasn't someone Drizzt could easily defeat. Although Drizzt will lose, he can still exhaust some of Long Zhao's spirit energy. Human, you'll go next. Either you win or exhaust Long Zhao's spirit energy. Qin Haoshuan didn't look favorably on Drizzt and had already begun to make arrangements for the next match. Currently, the Black Moon Combat Academy's side only had Qin Xuan, Baiyu, and Chen Chongqing left. Although Chen Chongqing had some intelligence, he wasn't a cause for concern. Baiyu had Yi Qingning to deal with, so Qin Haoshuan only needed to deal with Qin Xuan. Qin Haoshuan didn't care about the previous matches. The only person he cared about was Qin Xuan. As long as he could kill Qin Xuan on stage, it didn't matter even if he lost the match. While Qin Haoshuan was making arrangements for the next match, Drizzt had already been forced to the point of no retreat by Long Zhao. Seeing Long Zhao closing in on him step by step, Drizzt fiercely gritted his teeth and finally launched a desperate counterattack. Annihilation Storm. Drizzt angrily roared. The spirit energy in his body crazily surged and a powerful wind pressure descended on the stage. Gales rose in all directions, and the fierce wind was like a sharp blade that cut through everything it touched. Even the smallest speck of dust wasn't spared. It was truly worthy of the name Annihilation Storm. Seeing Drizzt counterattack, Long Zhao, who had been waiting for a long time, also roared, "Descent of the Divine Flame, Dark Destruction." Whoosh! The flames surged and suddenly turned into a vicious beast that brazenly pounced towards the hurricane. Chapter 339. In the arena, Yuna completely occupied the advantage at this time. She exerted her restraining effect on Long Zhao's talent Rune attribute to the extreme. She didn't give Long Xiao a chance to break free from the binding of the water prison technique and inscribe the rune array. Long Xiao could only passively defend and couldn't find a chance to fight back. Below the stage, on the side of the First Academy of Star Dragon, Qin Haoshuan, who had been furious after hearing Yuna's words, smiled and said to Yi Qingning beside him, "All is fair in war." Yuna has made good use of Long Xiao's mentality and irritability. She has successfully lured Long Xiao in her own trap. Very good. Yi Qingning nodded and said, "But what Yuna said before might not be all lies." Qin Haoshuan looked at Yi Qingning with a subtle expression and asked, "Do you also think that people from big families should be stronger than people from small families and commoners? At least from the perspective of the conditions, people from big families shouldn't be weak." Yi Qingning said indifferently, "The people we have been in contact with since childhood and the cultivation resources we have access to are incomparable to others. Therefore, isn't it normal and reasonable for us to perform well?" "What you said is reasonable, but I don't agree." Qin Haoshuan slowly turned to look at Qin Chuan and said, "At least before defeating Qin Chuan, I don't agree." Yi Qingning looked at Qin Haoshuan in surprise and asked, "Don't tell me you don't have confidence in defeating Qin Chuan." "I naturally have confidence. However, confidence doesn't represent everything. If confidence is enough to defeat an opponent, then what's the point of competing in strength? Let's just compete in confidence." Qin Haoshuan chuckled and said, "I've never lost in the aspect of confidence." While Qin Haoshuan and Yi Qingning were chatting, the other side of the Black Moon Combat Academy was not relaxed. Long Xiao's current situation was very dangerous. If he continued to be led by the nose by Yuna, he would definitely lose. Long Xiao is too careless. Chun Changxing sighed and said, "If Long Xiao can fight steadily and not let anger get to his head, then Yuna's scheme might not work. There's no point in talking about this now." Qin Chuan gently shook his head and said to Chun Changxing, "If she loses this match, it might not be a bad thing for Long Xiao. At least it can sharpen her mind. If she encounters such a situation in the future, she won't be fooled again. Suffering a loss in the arena is better than suffering a loss in a life and death situation." "Boss, you're really open-minded." Chun Changxing chuckled and said, "But there's nothing wrong with what you said. Long Xiao's personality does indeed have some flaws, and it should be properly honed." "It's over." Baiyu suddenly spoke, asserting that the competition was over. At the same time, the battle on the arena had also come to an end. Long Xiao, who was constantly forced to the edge of the arena by Yuna, finally could not bear it any longer. She completely unleashed the power of the black flames, wanting to force Yuna back and dissolve the water prison technique in her hands. However, Yuna was already prepared. The moment the black flames burned, the spiritual energy in her body surged, and a monstrous wave descended from the sky, rushing straight towards Long Xiao. Although this monstrous wave did not cause any substantial damage to Long Xiao, nor did it extinguish the black flames, it successfully sent Long Xiao out of the arena with a powerful impact. Out of bounds, Long Xiao stood below the arena, her face ashen. She looked at Yuna, who was standing on the arena, with a smile. She really wanted to tear apart Yuna's smug face. If she had not fallen into a trap, she might not have lost. "I'm really sorry I won this match." Yuna smiled and said to Long Xiao, "It's a pity that you unleashed your power too late. If you unleashed your power earlier, I might not have won so easily." As the victor, Yuna enjoyed this feeling very much. Long Xiao did not want to waste words with Yuna, so she turned around and left. For this match, the Black Moon Combat Academy's Long Xiao has stepped out of bounds. The winner is Star Dragon's First Academy's Yuna. When the referee announced the end of the match, the arena rang with enthusiastic applause and cheers. Yuna had perfectly shown the audience what it meant to return an eye for an eye. Long Xiao had defeated Drizzt with her attribute advantage, causing Drizzt to lose the match because he had stepped out of bounds. Yuna had also defeated Long Xiao with her attribute advantage, causing Long Xiaoye to lose the match because she had stepped out of bounds. In this match, I saw some of Chun Changxing's shadow in Yuna. Chen Chongqing is also good at using his intelligence to win. If you only look at the result and not the person, then I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me that Chen Chongqing was the winner. Yes, from this match, we can see that Yuna understands Chen Chongqing very well. I even suspect that she has studied Chen Chongqing before. Perhaps in the original plan of the First Academy of Star Dragon, Yuna's opponent was Chen Chongqing. What you said makes some sense. I also feel that this is possible. Now that the First Academy of Star Dragon and the Black Moon Combat Academy have returned to the same starting line, we'll see who the Black Moon Combat Academy will send next. If I'm not wrong, it should be Chen Chongqing. The moment the commentator's voice fell, the Black Moon Combat Academy's next candidate finally appeared. That's right, it was Chen Chongqing. Originally, Chen Chongqing had planned to be an ostrich and not fight. However, Long Xiao, who had returned in a sorry state, insisted that Chen Chongqing fight. Chen Chongqing, she actually dared to show off her intelligence in front of me. You'll fight the next match. You must make her faint. Facing the infuriated Long Xiao, Chen Chongqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He helplessly said, I say, Sister Xiao Xiao, I've clearly been thoroughly studied by others. Aren't you sending me to the tiger's den by sending me up? Seeing that Chen Chongqing had the intention to decline, Long Xiao sneered and said, I plan to ask Senior Sister Shu Xin to go shopping tomorrow. I'll also call a few young talents of our Long family. Who knows, we might be able to achieve a happy marriage. I'll go, okay? Chen Chongqing was about to cry. How could she threaten him like this? What the hell was wrong with her? Qin Chuan chuckled as he looked at the helpless Chen Chongqing and said, Chongqing, you must perform well. If you lose, you really don't live up to your name as the resourceful star. Chen Chongqing bitterly looked at Qin Chuan. Adding oil to the fire, Boss was really skilled at it. On the stage, when Yuna saw that the Black Moon Combat Academy's representative was Chen Chongqing, she couldn't help but sneer. If she was up against Baiyu or Qin Chuan, she definitely wouldn't have a chance of winning. However, against Chen Chongqing, she was sorry, but she was definitely going to win this match. Chapter 340. Chen Chongqing slowly walked up the arena under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. He looked at the confident Yuna standing in front of him and sighed helplessly. What I hate the most is facing an opponent like you, who requires a lot of brain power. It really isn't fun at all. I think it's very interesting. Fighting with you is more interesting than fighting with anyone else. Yuna looked at Chen Chongqing with a playful expression. She wanted to see how Chen Chongqing would deal with her. 6 Great Academies Ranking Tournament Finals. Star Dragon's First Academy versus Black Moon Combat Academy. Yuna versus Chen Chongqing. Let the match begin. When a referee announced the start of the match and blew the whistle, Yuna and Chen Chongqing did not move. Chen Chongqing even lazily sat down on the ground and adopted a passive attitude. I say, can we stop scheming against each other and use a more normal method to determine the winner? Hearing Chen Chongqing's suggestion, Yuna slightly raised her eyebrows and asked, what method do you plan on using to determine the winner? Something simple, the kind that doesn't need to use our hands. Chen Chongqing seriously said to Yuna, what do you think of rock, paper, scissors? When Chen Chongqing's words left his mouth, both the commentators and the audience were dumbfounded. In such a huge arena, in front of hundreds of thousands of live audience members and countless live broadcast viewers, he actually wanted to use rock, paper, scissors to decide the winner? Wasn't this a little too much? Are you joking with me? Yuna coldly smiled and said, you can't really think that I'll fall for it, right? Yuna definitely did not believe that Chen Chongqing would play some boring rock, paper, scissors game with her. She felt that Chen Chongqing must have some ulterior motive. It was definitely not as simple as it seemed. Between people, there should be a little more trust. What do you think? Chen Chongqing spread out his hands and said to Yuna, if you really don't believe me, then why don't you suggest a simpler method to determine the winner? I think it's better to fight properly. Yuna did not fall for it. She maintained her vigilance against Chen Chongqing and did not easily believe any of his words. Chen Chongqing sighed and said, "Since that's the case, I won't hold back." Before Chen Chongqing could finish speaking, the ground beneath Yuna's feet suddenly turned into a golden quagmire. Caught off guard, Yuna's legs sank deep into the quagmire, unable to extricate herself. Yuna looked at the quagmire under her feet in shock. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Chen Chongqing. She cried out involuntarily, "This is impossible. When did you inscribe this talisman formation?" Chen Chongqing patted his butt and stood up from the ground. He smiled and said to Na, "In the past, I needed a talisman pen to inscribe a talisman array. It wasn't because I couldn't create an array in the void, but because my speed was too slow. My opponents wouldn't give me the time to do so. You didn't really think that I didn't want to fight with you and wanted to use rock, paper, scissors to decide the winner, did you?" Hearing Chen Chongqing's explanation, how could you not understand that she had been tricked? You deliberately sat on the ground to lower my vigilance and chatted with me about some unimportant topics. Then, you secretly inscribe a talisman array. You're too insidious. Yuna was furious. She did not expect that she would still fall for Chen Chongqing's trick after all her precautions. "I've already warned you not to play this kind of brain game with me. What can I do if you don't listen?" Chen Chongqing shrugged and looked at Yuna with a smile. "You're telling me this now because you want to stall for time and break free from the quagmire's shackles, right?" Hearing Chen Chongqing's words, Yuna's expression could not help but change slightly. The next moment, a strong spiritual energy suddenly gushed out from under her feet and rushed her into the air. Just when Yuna thought that she had escaped the quagmire's shackles, a golden net suddenly fell from the sky and enveloped her, quickly tightening. Plop! Yuna, who had just escaped from the quagmire, had her hands and feet bound by the net. With a plop, she fell onto the stage. She struggled, but the net became tighter and tighter. It was so tight that she almost could not breathe. Chen Chongqing slowly walked in front of Yuna and squatted down. He looked at Yuna with a smile and said, "I've already told you not to play this kind of brain game with me. Why won't you listen? You're stalling for time with me, but I'm also stalling for time with you. This net is called the Binding Shadow. The more you struggle, the tighter it will become. You should give up." As he spoke, Chen Chongqing made a beheading gesture on Yuna's neck. He then turned to look at the referee below the stage and laughed. "Referee, did I win?" The referee looked at Yuna's condition and then announced, "Star Dragon's First Academy's Yuna has lost the ability to fight. I hereby announce that the winner of this match is the Black Moon Combat Academy's Chen Chongqing." After the referee's announcement, the entire arena erupted into enthusiastic cheers. Regardless of whether they were fans of the Black Moon Combat Academy or not, they were all convinced by Chen Chongqing's performance. Chen Chongqing might not be the strongest in terms of combat power, but in terms of intelligence and strategy, Chen Chongqing definitely deserved to be called number one. Hearing the audience's enthusiastic cheers, I'm sincerely happy for Chen Chongqing. He's not someone who specializes in combat, but he uses his intelligence and wisdom to lead his opponents into his own territory. He then uses his rich experience to defeat his opponents time and time again. In my opinion, this is a very rare and valuable trait. Your words have touched the bottom of my heart. Looking at all of Chen Chongqing's matches, no matter how strong or weak his opponents were, he was always able to find a breakthrough and create opportunities for himself to win. This kind of contestant is very rare, and I believe that Chen Chongqing's future achievements will not be too low. However, Chen Chongqing won't have it easy in the upcoming matches. The First Academy of Star Dragon only has Yi Qingning and Qin Haoshuan left. No matter who Chen Chongqing faces, it will be very difficult for him to win. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes are useless. Crackle. In the room, the brand new porcelain and tea set, which had just been replaced 2 days ago, were once again smashed to pieces by the exasperated Chen Aochu. His face was twisted, and his eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Chen Chongqing, who was standing in the ring with a smile on his face. He really wanted to smash that disgusting face of his through the crystal screen. I'm going crazy. I'm going crazy. I'm really going crazy. Chen Aochu angrily roared, letting out an unwilling roar. He wanted to kill Chen Chongqing, and he couldn't wait any longer. Chapter 341. After winning, Chen Chongqing did not continue to stay in the arena. Instead, he quickly walked down to the reserve area and said to Long Xiao with a smile, "Sister Xiao Xiao, what do you think of my performance?" "Not bad, not bad." Long Xiao nodded with satisfaction and said, "To deal with that kind of person, you should be the one to fight." Hearing Long Xiao's words, Chen Chongqing's face instantly darkened. He was speechless and said, "Sister Xiao Xiao, what kind of person am I? Of course you are a smart person, unlike me. My IQ is only at the level of a normal person." Long Xiao laughed and said to Chen Chongqing, "Tomorrow, I won't ask senior sister Shu Xian to go shopping. Let's forget about introducing the young talents." That's what I was waiting for. Chen Chongqing could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Seeing Chen Chongqing's performance, Qin Chuan helplessly shook his head and said, "Please be serious. This is the finals, not a place to play. The opponents in the finals are not all strong. Other than Yi Qingning and Qin Haoshuan, the others are just there to make up the numbers." Chen Chongqing laughed and said to Qin Chuan, "Boss, I'm not going to fight in the next round. It's time for you and by you to fight." Only Yi Qingning and Qin Haoshuan were left on Star Dragon's First Academy side. Chen Chongqing had no chance of winning against either of them, so he had no intention of continuing with the next match. I knew you would say that. You don't need to fight in the next round, nor does Baiyu. I'll do it. Hearing that Qin Chuan was going to fight, Baiyu frowned and said, "They will probably let Yi Qingning fight. Let me do it." Baiyu knew that Qin Chuan's ultimate target was Qin Haoshuan. If she fought against Qin Haoshuan, it would be fine. If she fought against Yi Qingning, she would inevitably consume some of her spiritual power. At that time, she would be at a disadvantage against Qin Haoshuan, which would be very disadvantageous for Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan pondered for a moment and said to Baiyu, "Okay, you can do it." On the other side, Yi Qingning glanced at the expressionless Qin Haoshuan and asked, "Do you want to fight or should I?" "You do it." Qin Haoshuan glanced at Yi Qingning and said, "Now is not the time to be a gentleman. If my opponent is not Qin Chuan, I don't want to fight." Although Qin Haoshuan had absolute confidence that he could defeat Qin Chuan, that was based on the premise that he was in peak condition. If he made a move early and fought against a super strong opponent like Baiyu, even if he could defeat Baiyu, he might not have a chance of winning against Qin Chuan. Therefore, Yi Qingning had a fight in the next round. Yi Qingning was not surprised by Qin Haoshuan's decision. She did not think that Qin Haoshuan's decision was wrong. She nodded slightly and walked towards the Black Moon Combat Academy side. Qin Haoshuan was stunned when he saw Yi Qingning's actions. What was she doing? Yi Qingning's actions attracted everyone's attention. Everyone stared at Yi Qingning as she walked step by step towards the Black Moon Combat Academy's group. They couldn't help but wonder what she was trying to do. This was the first time that Qin Chuan had looked at Yi Qingning at such a close distance. He had to admit that although he could not see Yi Qingning's face under the veil, just her eyes alone were enough to move people. They were clear and bright, just like the bright full moon. "Qin Chuan, the person you're sending out next should be Baiyu, right?" Yi Qingning looked at Qin Chuan calmly and asked. Qin Chuan smiled and said, "Do you have any suggestions?" "To be honest, I really want to compete with you. However, if my opponent is Baiyu, then I'm not that interested." Yi Qingning looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Baiyu and I will forfeit at the same time. Then, you and Qin Haoshuan will fight in the final round. What do you think?" Qin Chuan was surprised when he heard Yi Qingning's words. "Don't you want to show off your skills in the arena? Only people without confidence need to stand in the arena to prove themselves." Yi Qingning smiled faintly. "I don't need other people's recognition, nor do I need to prove anything." Qin Chuan looked at Yi Qingning with a subtle gaze and said, "You said that you wanted to compete with me. Why?" Yi Qingning looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Little Shui is my roommate. She's also one of my few friends. After Yi Qingning's explanation, Qinchuan's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect Wang Wenxue to become friends with Yi Qingning. Speaking of which, he hadn't seen Wang Wenxue for a long time since the end of the newcomer competition. Yi Qingning seemed to have seen through Qinchuan's inner thoughts. She said helplessly to Qinchuan, "Since the end of the newcomer competition, little Shui has locked herself up and has been cultivating. I want to see her a few times. She has been training almost nonstop. I understand her and know that she can't accept the fact that she lost to you. Originally, I wanted to defeat you and get back some face for little Shui. However, after thinking about it carefully, I feel that there's no point in doing so. I hope to see her defeat you with her own hands in the future. Soon, the unfettered secret territory will be opened. You should have a quota to enter. Little Shui will also enter with me. At that time, we will fight." Qinchuan looked at Yi Qingning with a complicated gaze and said, "Okay, I agree." Qinchuan's feelings towards Wang Wenxue were very complicated. Now that he knew that Wang Wenxue and Yi Qingning had become friends, he was relieved that Yi Qingning would take care of her. Looking at Yi Qingning's departing figure, Baiyu looked at Qinchuan and asked, "You really don't need me to fight?" "No." Qinchuan shook his head and said, "I can't wait to fight with Qin Haoshuan." As he spoke, Qinchuan looked at Qin Haoshuan in the distance. At this moment, Qin Haoshuan also looked at Qinchuan, as if he had sensed something. Their gazes met in the air, and it was as if lightning had intersected. Their fighting spirit was astonishing, and their killing intent was biting cold. At this moment, the referee had also received the signals from the Black Moon Combat Academy and the First Academy of Star Dragon. After confirming the intentions of both sides, the referee loudly announced to the audience, "Yi Qingning from the First Academy of Star Dragon and Baiyu from the Black Moon Combat Academy have both forfeited. Next up will be the final battle of the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. Qin Haoshuan from the First Academy of Star Dragon will fight against Qinchuan from the Black Moon Combat Academy." After the referee's announcement, a huge uproar was set off in the arena. Who would have thought that a participant would forfeit in such a crucial battle? Moreover, the exciting battle between Qin Haoshuan and Qinchuan that everyone had been waiting for had been brought forward. Chapter 342. What? Yi Qingning and Baiyu both forfeited at the same time? In other words, the battle between Qin Haoshuan and Qinchuan is about to start ahead of schedule. To be honest, although the previous matches were also very exciting, I've been looking forward to this most important match. Although it's a pity that Yi Qingning and Baiyu gave up and let us miss an exciting match, at the same time, we can watch the match between Qinchuan and Qin Haoshuan earlier. I think it's worth it. The commentator's words resonated with the hearts of many spectators. There were too many people who had come to watch the battle between Qinchuan and Qin Haoshuan. It had been too many years since they had seen such a heated battle. The grudge between Qinchuan and Qin Haoshuan had started during the freshman competition and erupted during the first stage of the official competition. Under the leadership of Qinchuan, the Black Moon Combat Academy had defeated all their opponents. First, they had defeated the Federal Military University, then the Black Heaven Sect's affiliated university, and then the Divine Sword Academy. After overcoming 3 obstacles, they finally stood on the stage of the finals and faced the Star Dragon's First Academy. All of this sounded easy, but was actually extremely difficult to accomplish. Regardless of whether it was Shimin Bei from the Federal Military University or Su Kuang from the Divine Sword Academy, none of them were weak. None of them could be easily defeated, but both of them had fallen in front of the Black Moon Combat Academy's generals. Since the beginning of the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament, the Black Moon Combat Academy was the only team that had defeated all their opponents from the revival round to the finals. At the same time, they were the only team that had a captain who had participated in both the freshman competition and the official competition. In this year's 6 Great Academies ranking tournament, the Black Moon Combat Academy had created too many miracles and too many legends. Now, They were about to face the most crucial battle that would allow them to reach the peak. It was also the final battle. Although many spectators weren't fans of the Black Moon Combat Academy, they sincerely hoped that the Black Moon Combat Academy could create a miracle and create a new history. However, this didn't mean that no one supported Star Dragon's first academy. As the most famous and powerful academy in the Star Dragon Federation, Star Dragon's first academy had always been the cradle of the strong in everyone's eyes. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that any student who could successfully graduate from Star Dragon's first academy could become an independent figure no matter where they went. And for a genius among geniuses like Qin Haoshuan, the best of the best, his future was bound to be limitless. Although Qin Haoshuan hadn't fought many times, he had already displayed an invincible demeanor. If Qin Haoshuan could defeat Qin Chuan in this battle, then his reputation would reach the peak and he would become the irreplaceable leader of the younger generation. It could be said that countless people had high hopes for Qin Haoshuan in this battle. There were also countless people who wanted to push Qin Haoshuan to the next level and stand at the top. No matter what, Qin Haoshuan couldn't lose. Qin family. Qin Yiming sat on the sofa and looked at the noisy scene on the crystal screen. Suddenly, he said, "Let's go to the scene." Hearing Qin Yiming's words, Qin Hu, who was standing at the side, said in a low voice, "The room has already been arranged. We can depart now. Let's go. My son is going to reach the top. As his father, it's best for me to witness it with my own eyes and give him a congratulatory gift on the scene." Qin Yiming took a deep look at Qin Chuan's figure on the crystal screen and said coldly, "All the obstacles in my son's way must be smashed." Yi family. Yi Ching leaned on his walking stick and sat on the sofa. He looked at Qin Chuan's figure on the crystal screen with a subtle expression. He said to the old man beside him, "What do you think Qin Ming said to him?" The old man thought for a while and replied, "It should be about the forfeiture. If it was just about the forfeiture, they shouldn't have talked for so long." Yi Cheng stood up slowly and said to the old man, "Let's go and take a look at the scene. I want to feel the vitality of the young people." "Yes," the old man replied respectfully. He turned around and prepared to go to the scene to watch the battle. Xian Tian sect. Chun Xianfeng stood at the top of the mountain and looked at the old man with a deep gaze. He said, "Senior brother, Chongqing won another match. He looks much smarter than before." Annan heard Chen Xuanfeng's words and moved slightly. He didn't say anything. "Senior brother, don't you want to go and take a look? How far can that kid, whom Chongqing regards as his boss, go?" Chen Xianfeng looked at Annan with a complicated expression. He said, "Back then, we helped each other to bring Xiantian's sect to where it is today. Now, Chongqing has a brother that he can treat with all his heart. Don't you want to see his performance with your own eyes?" Annan turned around slowly and looked at Chen Xianfeng. After a moment of silence, he said, "If that's the case, let's go." Chen Xianfeng laughed and said, "Maybe after the match, we can have a celebratory feast with that little guy. I hope Chongqing will welcome me. Senior brother, you have to put in a good word for me." Annan's eyes moved slightly. He said, "You are father and son after all." If possible, Annan also hoped that Chen Xianfeng and Chen Chongqing could get along well. In the office of the Black Moon Combat Academy, Ningya, who had just woken up, stretched lazily on the sofa. She then glanced at the silent crystal screen, and her eyes moved slightly. Oh my, is the most anticipated show finally about to begin? As a teacher, if I don't go to the scene to cheer for my student, wouldn't it be a little inappropriate? As she spoke, Ningya slowly got up and walked out of the room calmly. World Stadium, competition venue. Amidst the excited cheers and shouts of the audience, Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan slowly walked up to the arena from different directions. They stood in the center of the arena and faced each other with a distance of 10 meters. Looking at Qin Haoshuan, who was standing in front of him, Qin Chuan's emotions were very complicated. His eyes were also very complicated. He faintly sighed and said, "It's not easy for me to stand in front of you today." If he had not gone to the Dragon Spirit Lake, if he had not met Azure Dragon Song Hao, if he had not refined his body with dragon blood, he might have participated in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition. However, he might not have had any conflicts with Qin Haoshuan, and he would not have signed a life and death agreement with Qin Haoshuan. In the end, the reason was that Qin Chongxiao had helped Qin Haoshuan obtain the dragon soul of Tsang Hao's son. He had inexplicably become the spokesperson for Tsang Hao's revenge plan. It's not easy. Although Qin Haoshuan did not understand the deeper meaning of Qin Xuan's words, Qin Xuan had led the Black Moon Combat Academy all the way from the revival round to the finals. It was not easy. Therefore, he would do his best today to give Qin Xuan the grandest treatment. Chapter 343. Perhaps this is a fated meeting. Qin Xuan narrowed his eyes and looked sharply at Qin Haoshuan. Enjoy the rest of the time. Indeed, I should enjoy it. After all, I haven't met an interesting opponent like you for a long time. Qin Haoshuan had been invincible for too long. Whether it was Zhou Lin or Su Kuang, he could always win. He could even win without using 70% of his strength. He couldn't remember the last time he fought to his heart's content. Now that he was facing Qin Xuan, he seemed to have found that feeling of surging blood again. To be honest, that feeling of invincibility didn't make him feel excited. Instead, it made him feel a little lonely. The final match of the 6 Great Academies ranking tournament. First Academy's Qin Haoshuan versus Black Moon Combat Academy's Qin Xuan. Let the match begin. When the referee's whistle sounded, Qin Haoshuan and Qin Xuan moved at almost the same time. Accompanied by an ear-piercing roar, Qin Haoshuan raised his hand and blasted Qin Xuan with a wind blast. A huge wind pressure swept across everything in front of it and fiercely bombarded Qin Xuan's body. Sizzle. When the wind blast hit Qin Xuan's body suddenly turned into a flash of lightning and flickered as it dissipated in the air. At the same time, a roar of wind and thunder sounded behind Qin Haoshuan. Qin Xuan's figure strangely appeared behind Qin Haoshuan. He raised his hand and punched out. Although it was a straightforward punch, it contained enough power to topple mountains and overturn seas. Bang! Qin Haoshuan didn't dodge. He turned around and punched out as well. When his fist collided with Qin Xuan's, a dull collision immediately erupted. The astonishing power fluctuations were like a huge stone being thrown into a lake, setting off waves on the stage. Bang, bang, bang. After this fist collided, the two of them attacked swiftly. They attacked repeatedly, and their figures flashed swiftly on the arena like bolts of lightning. Their speed was so swift that it was practically impossible to see them with the naked eye, causing others to be utterly unable to see their exact location. What a wonderful collision. Both Qin Haoshuan and Qin Xuan have exerted their speed and strength to the extreme. Such a powerful impact is enough to tear apart the body of an early foundation establishment stage cultivator. However, the two of them are not affected at all. This is just a preliminary test between the two of them. I really don't know what will happen when they go all out. When the audience heard the commentator's words, they couldn't help but cheer for Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan. They couldn't wait to see the big scene. On the other side, Qin Yiming, who had arrived at the scene, sat on the sofa in the box. He calmly looked at the battle scene displayed on the crystal screen. He watched the figures of Qin Xuan and Qin Haoshuan collide fiercely again and again. Then they separated and collided again. Qin Yiming commented indifferently. Qin Xuan does have some of the style of Chen Xianfeng. What a pity. Yi Cheng, who was sitting at the side, chuckled when he heard Qin Yiming's comment. He didn't ask Qin Yiming what a pity. It was because everyone knew that Qin Yiming was feeling pity for Qin Xuan's identity. If Qin Xuan was a descendant of an aristocratic family, he might be able to make a name for himself in the future. However, he was just a poor kid from the slums who dared to provoke the Qilin son of the Qin family. His future was already doomed. Haoshuan likes your Qingning very much. Uncle Yi, I intend to let the two of them get closer to each other. What do you think? Qin Yiming turned his head to look at Yi Cheng. He actually proposed a marriage alliance. Let the little guys deal with their own matters. We shouldn't interfere. Moreover, Isn't your family's kid chased by the Qian family's daughter? Yi Cheng smiled and tactfully rejected Qin Yiming's proposal. Yi Qingning was the pride of the Yi family. How could they use her for a marriage alliance? Qin Yiming didn't mention it anymore. He turned his head to look at the crystal screen and said, "That's really a pity." Today, Qin Haoshuan would use this battle to climb to the top of the younger generation. Now, Yi Qingning was known as the goddess of Star Dragon and was worthy of Qin Haoshuan. However, in the future, it might not be so. What's the situation now? Chen Changxing looked at the direction of the arena. He felt that his eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. However, he didn't see anything. They are moving at high speed. Very fast. Long Xiao said to Chen Changxing with a serious expression, "I've tried my best, but I still can't keep up with their speed." As Long Xiao spoke, her eyes moved quickly to capture the figures moving at high speed in the arena. She couldn't help but feel deeply exhausted. Bai Yu was also paying attention to the battle in the arena. However, compared to Long Xiao, she was much more relaxed. At this moment, she had closed her eyes and was completely relying on her perception of blood to observe the battle. It was much clearer and more intuitive than her eyes. In the spectator stands, Zhou Lin's gaze was somewhat complicated as she watched the intense collision between Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan on the stage. That youth, who once needed her protection, had finally grown up. Linlin, Qin Chuan is so strong. Duan Yusin rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. Such a high-intensity movement of her eyeballs was already too much for her to bear. He is indeed very strong. Zhou Lin pursed her lips. Thinking of what her father said to her yesterday, her eyes couldn't help but reveal a helpless sadness. Boom! Qin Chuan roared angrily. Lightning flashed on his iron fist, and he fiercely bombarded Qin Haoshuan's chest. Qin Haoshuan groaned and hit Qin Chuan's chest with a backhand palm. A gust of wind whistled and bombarded Qin Chuan's chest. After the two of them hit each other, they quickly retreated and temporarily distanced themselves from each other. Qin Chuan panted slightly. He lowered his head and looked at his burning chest. The feeling of being torn apart made his heart palpitate. Compared to Qin Chuan, Qin Haoshuan wasn't any better. His chest had already been hit by Qin Chuan's punch. It was already red and swollen. It was very painful. However, this pain didn't make Qin Haoshuan angry. Instead, it made him excited. Extreme Wind Sword. Qin Haoshuan roared angrily. He waved his right hand, and a silver-gray, sharp blade flashed. It almost instantly arrived in front of Qin Chuan and pierced toward Qin Chuan's chest. Rapid thunder. Almost at the same time, a light blue light lit up under Qin Chuan's feet. His figure flashed and moved to the side in the blink of an eye. He narrowly dodged the attack of the sword. The moment Qin Chuan dodged the sword, Qin Haoshuan's figure appeared in front of Qin Chuan like a gust of wind. He opened his right hand and aimed at Qin Chuan. He said coldly, "Extreme wind repulsion." A powerful repulsive force was produced in an instant. It suddenly pressed the defenseless Qin Chuan into the arena. Rocks and dust flew everywhere. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.